Chapter 1195, Eighth Life. Patriarch save me. One of the old Jai clan cultivators screamed as he went all out trying to fight against the spell formation hand. However, all his magical techniques fell to pieces, and he was torn to shreds, causing blood to rain down into the clouds below. The illusory hand burst with the power of extermination. Lightning crashed and exploded, becoming the only sound in heaven and earth. A middle-aged Jai clan cultivator, eyes bloodshot, performed an incantation gesture that caused numerous magical items to fly out of his bag of holding. However, the hand shattered them all. Blood sprayed from the man's mouth, splattering back onto his face. He screamed as he was destroyed, completely shredded into nothing. Two more Jai clan cultivators performed incantation gestures, summoning magical techniques and karma threads. In the blink of an eye, their karma was destroyed, and then the hand completely wiped them out. Patriarch save us! Miserable screams echoed out, filled with astonishment and dread. Unfortunately for them, the screams were completely drowned out by the lightning. Everything happened very quickly. Although it takes some time to describe, Meng Hao's single explosive attack with the South Heaven Death Formation instantly killed almost all of the dozen or so Jai clan cultivators. A moment later, only two were left. One was the young man, and the other was the elder who had been in the leadership position of this group that had come to planet South Heaven. They immediately fell back, avoiding death for the moment. However, the hand continued to rumble toward them with unbelievable speed. Meng Hao, the old man roared, is your Fang clan trying to start a war with the Jai clan? He waved his hand, causing cultivation base power to erupt into a windstorm that rumbled so loudly it vied with the thunder. Meng Hao's face was icy cold as he shoved his hand down. More rumbling could be heard as the spell formation's hand crushed down through the clouds toward the two remaining cultivators. Blood sprayed out of the old man's mouth, and a look of despair covered his face as he began to collapse. In the moment before he shattered, the young man flickered into place behind him and pushed down onto his back. "Since you're going to die, you might as well help me," the young man murmured. Rumble! The enormous hand continued to surge through the clouds, causing them to seethe and churn. By now, the sound had reached the ears of the cultivators down below, who heard a shocking rumbling. They could also see the clouds shaking. Massive amounts of lightning crackled about as if they had been squeezed out of the sponge-like clouds, falling from the clouds like silver dragons. Given that even the lightning had been forcibly expelled, huge bean-sized drops of rain also began to pour down onto the lands beneath. However, what no one noticed was that some of that rain was the color of blood. That was because it wasn't rain at all but blood, the blood of the Jai clan. However, there was no life within that blood, and the amount was minuscule, as if the vast majority of it had been swallowed up by the clouds themselves. What nobody down below could see was that, somewhere within the dark clouds, a blood-colored figure sat cross-legged in meditation, surrounded by a cloud of the blood that had disappeared, which it was constantly consuming. If you looked closely, that blood-colored figure was emanating the karmic aura of the Jai clan, as well as a faint, murderous aura. This was Meng Hao's blood clone. It had been years since Meng Hao's cultivation base had grown so powerful that the blood clone was essentially useless and had remained tucked away in his bag of holding. He had even given up on the idea of turning it into a blood divinity. 1. I didn't have time to link to all the previous relevant chapters with the blood clone. If I recall correctly, the last time it appeared was in the battle for the southern domain. I did pull up a chapter where the blood divinity was mentioned, chapter 265. Then Jai Tian had gone and tried to kill his father, which stoked Meng Hao's killing intent and rage to the point where he decided to collect more generations of Jai clan blood and continue his plan to build his blood divinity, which would have the power of ancestral awakening. Thus, less blood fell down among the rain than would be expected, and what fell was in fact diluted to the point that no one could see it. In fact, only a single drop landed on the face of one of the cultivators down below, who looked up in shock after wiping it away. Back up in the clouds and lightning, Meng Hao extended his right hand, causing the spell formation's hand to gradually disperse, leaving behind a huge handprint within the clouds. One palm had killed the Jai clan cultivators as if they were ants. Although that power did not come from Meng Hao himself, at this moment, he felt a sort of mightiness that could only come after one possessed the power to control heaven and earth, the kind of domineering feeling that came from being matchless in all of creation. As the hand faded away, two people became visible within the handprint that was left behind. It was none other than the two people who hadn't been killed. Of course, it would be most correct to say that it was one person, not two. The old man's aura was no longer present. A huge hole was now visible in his back, and it was possible to see that no organs existed inside of his body. He was an empty husk, inside of which the young man was concealed. Clearly, he hadn't simply hidden inside the man, but used some sort of sinister secret magic to avoid being killed by the enormous net. Cracking sounds could be heard as the husk of the old man fell into pieces. The young man staggered back, coughing up blood. At the same time, countless karma threads exploded out of him, filling the area and transforming into what looked like a teleportation spell formation. The blood spraying from his mouth fell down through the clouds to be sucked towards, and voraciously consumed by the blood clone which was hidden there. Of course, the young man had no idea about the blood clone. Even as his body began to fade, Meng Hao gave a cold harumph. "You're not going anywhere," he said, advancing, hand clenching into a fist. He punched out, causing the air to distort. However, as he closed in on the young man, Meng Hao suddenly felt a sense of crisis, and it was in that moment that the young man smiled eerily. "You finally got close," he murmured. Instead of dodging out of the way of Meng Hao's fist, he actually charged directly forward to meet it. Rumbling could be heard as the young man's body was shattered, causing blood and gore to spray out in all directions. However, his laughter continued to echo out in the air. "Meng Hao, our karma has been tied. Next time we meet, what's yours will be mine. Remember our shared name. We are called Jade. Wild laughter echoed out as the young man's body faded away. Meng Hao hovered there, frowning. Finally, he looked down thoughtfully at his fist inside. I wanted to kill him, but apparently that was part of his plan. What a clever fellow, this Jai Dingyang. All of the Jai clan cultivators he brought with him were being used as a smokescreen. And the entire reason why he dared to come to planet South Heaven was to use a Jai clan secret magic to bind me with karma, and in turn, unleash some sort of mysterious Taoist magic. I was luring him into a trap, and he was doing the same to me. He didn't want to be killed by the South Heaven death formation. He wanted to be killed by me personally. Even as he hovered there thinking, the blood clone which had been hiding in the clouds below slowly floated up. It was now very different than before, more powerful, and emanating a powerful aura of Jai clan karma. In fact, it even seemed to be poised on the verge of a breakthrough. With a little more progress, it would finally break through and take a step closer to being a blood divinity capable of ancestral awakening. If the ancestral awakening occurs, I wonder if whatever appears will be as powerful as Jai Tian himself. Eyes flickering, he ceased worrying about the matter of Jai Dingyang. All he could do now was be on guard against this new powerful adversary. After putting his blood clone into his bag of holding, he shot back down through the clouds. Meanwhile, in the Jai clan on the 9th mountain, there was a restricted area that was a graveyard. 9 coffins were lined up there, all of them bronze and carved with complicated magical symbols. 7 of those coffins had no lids and were empty. Only the 8th and 9th coffins were closed tightly. Suddenly, powerful rumbling like that of thunder could be heard, and the lid of the 8th coffin opened with a bang. A powerful aura immediately surged out from within. A hand stretched up from inside the 8th coffin. At first, it was trembling, but then it grew steady and grabbed the side of the coffin. A person slowly sat up, then stood. His body was shriveled like a corpse, so desiccated that it was difficult to make out his facial features. A mark could be seen on his forehead, and despite the withered nature of his body, that mark was clearly visible. Unexpectedly, it was an echelon mark. Shockingly, this man was an echelon cultivator. He took a breath, sucking in all the energy of heaven and earth in the area. As he did, his body rapidly regenerated. His blood and flesh wriggled, and life flooded back into him as he rapidly transformed back into a young man. His facial features slowly filled back in, and in the end, a face appeared which no one had ever seen before. I still prefer the appearance of my 7th life, he said in a raspy voice. He was my favorite among the junior generation. Then the face rapidly changed, transforming into Jai Dingyang. The karma has been bound and my 8th life body has been awakened. I've also secured the host for my 9th life, Meng Hao. Once we share the same body, then you will be my 9th life. Jai Dingyang began to laugh, a strange and sinister laughter filled with an ancient air. He looked up and shockingly, a huge eye appeared up above him, within which sat an old man. The two of them looked at each other. The most eerie thing was that if there were a third person present to observe the scene, they would find that the look in the old man's eyes and the look in Jade eyes were exactly the same. Chapter 1196, Taking Away the Terracotta Soldier. The rest of the coronation of the clan chief came to a conclusion without a hitch. All sects and powers in the Ninth Mountain and Sea would henceforth treat Fang Ziyufeng with incredible politeness. After all, Fang Ziyufeng now represented the entire Fang clan. Large numbers of Fang clan cultivators were stationed on planet South Heaven, and permanent teleportation portals were set up, linking it directly to planet East Victory. This also meant that it was no longer just Fang Ziyufeng who stood guard over planet South Heaven. It became the responsibility of the whole Fang clan, including Fang Xiaodao and Fang Yangsu, and no one shirked their duty. Protect the mountain and sea realm, that was the oath of the All-Heaven clans. 3 days after the ceremony was over, Meng Hao bid farewell to his parents and left planet South Heaven. He wasn't sure when he would be back in the Ninth Mountain and Sea, so he decided that he should go see some of his old friends before leaving. Some he would visit to reminisce. Others he would visit to collect money. His first stop would be planet East Victory. He made use of the teleportation portal on planet South Heaven to travel directly there. On his way to the ancestral mansion, he stopped by the Tao of Alchemy Division to pay respects to Pill Elder and visit some old friends. Then, he and Fang Xiaodao opened up the clan's ancestral land. He stood there looking at the enormous vortex and the familiar ancestral land therein. His heart trembled as he saw the terracotta soldier in the form of a mountain, and couldn't help but think of Qi Yunhai. "Dad," he murmured. He stepped forward into the vortex and appeared in front of the terracotta soldier. It was currently sleeping, but as soon as he appeared, its aura awakened, and it slowly opened its eyes. Rumbling echoed out as it rose to its feet, and the power of a quasi-Dao cultivation base erupted out. It had been waiting this entire time for Meng Hao to come and take it away. The day had finally come. "I'm going to take you away," Meng Hao said. "You're going to be with me, for all eternity." He slowly lifted his hand and patted the terracotta soldier as its aura caused memories of stepdad Qi to swirl in his head. "There's another terracotta soldier out there somewhere, and I'm going to get that one back too." He took a deep breath and then waved his hand. The terracotta soldier instantly transformed into a beam of light that flew into the piece of the ruins of immortality that he'd acquired from Paragon Sea Dream. The terracotta soldier had long since become connected inseparably with the ruins of immortality, although not the land itself, but its energy. The entire reason it was unable to leave the Fang clan ancestral land was because without that energy, it would die. That was the main reason that Meng Hao requested a piece of the ruins of immortality from Paragon Sea Dream. It was all for the terracotta soldier. As the terracotta soldier entered his own piece of the ruins of immortality, Meng Hao's heart began to beat nervously. After all, his whole plan was based on speculation. However, after seeing that the terracotta soldier showed no signs of being unable to adapt, he breathed a sigh of relief. From now on we'll travel together through the mountain and sea realm. Next, his eyes began to glow as he looked in the direction of the necropolis far off in the distance and bowed. Just as he was about to leave, the ancient voice of the first-generation patriarch echoed out into his mind. The legacy of Lord Li was once on planet South Heaven. Later it came to planet East Victory, and now it's in the 8th Mountain and Sea. As the voice echoed out, a jade slip flew out of the necropolis to appear in front of Meng Hao. He reached out and took it. This jade slip shows the current location of the legacy of Lord Li. With this, you should be able to track it down. The legacy was originally intended for someone in the Dao realm. However, considering your current cultivation base, you can still find and acquire the legacy. It will be of great help to you. The longer the first-generation patriarch spoke, the weaker his voice got. Meng Hao sent some divine sense into the jade slip and could immediately sense something calling to him through the starry sky. It was faint, but he was now sure that if he went looking, he would be able to find the source of that call. What he found strange was that the location of Lord Li's legacy was not fixed within the 8th Mountain and Sea. Instead, it seemed to be moving. Planet South Heaven, planet East Victory, the 8th Mountain. Meng Hao's eyes widened as he made a sudden, wild speculation. "No way," he murmured. Meanwhile, in the starry sky of the 8th Mountain and Sea, a gargantuan turtle was flying along happily, humming a little tune, surrounded by hundreds of tough-looking cultivators who were apparently guards. As they flew along with the turtle, they cried out in loud voices. "The Patriarch is mighty, Reliance is mighty. The Patriarch is invincible, Reliance is invincible. Their voices echoed out in powerful sound waves, spreading out in all directions. Any cultivators who encountered them were immediately shocked. Of course, this turtle was none other than Patriarch Reliance, who was now as free as a bird, smacking his lips proudly, looking very much at ease. The 8th mountain is way better than the 9th mountain. No matter where I look, there's no Meng Hao. Without him, everything is wonderful. Patriarch Reliance sighed emotionally as he realized that making the decision to flee from the 9th mountain and sea couldn't have been more right. That little bastard Meng Hao wouldn't imagine in his wildest dreams that I'll never again be fooling around with him in the 9th mountain and sea. Finally, I can be footloose and fancy-free in the 8th mountain and sea. Patriarch Reliance was very proud of himself and loved how the cultivators clustered around him and called him mighty. However, it was at this point that he suddenly shivered out of nowhere. What's going on? Why do I feel so jittery all of a sudden? A strange look appeared on Patriarch Reliance's face for a moment, but he thought little more of it and continued on his merry way. Back in the 9th mountain and sea, Meng Hao put the jade slip away with a wry expression on his face. Clasping hands to the first-generation patriarch, he then left the ancestral land and headed toward the teleportation portal with those speculations running through his mind. Halfway there, he suddenly turned to find a black-robed cultivator sitting, cross-legged on a nearby mountain peak. Before, this cultivator would wear white, but later, he had become the shadow of the clan, and from then on, wore clothing as black as the night to indicate how he would eternally exist in the darkness. It was Fang Wei. This location was a place that had to be passed by to get to the teleportation portal, and he had been waiting here specifically for Meng Hao. Their gazes met and neither said anything at first. A moment passed and then Meng Hao smiled. "What is the meaning of your name, Fang Wei?" A tremor ran through Fang Wei. Meng Hao's question brought back many memories. A bright glow appeared in his eyes. Voice low and filled with determination, he replied, "That I'm going to defend the Fang clan." 1. In case you forgot, the story of how Fang Wei got his name and what it means was in chapter 998. Meng Hao waved his finger, which caused Fang Wei to shake one more time. Suddenly, an intense azure light began to shine off of him. This was the light of an all-heaven immortal. The Tao seed inside of him was now mostly awakened, causing his cultivation base to burn with the power of an imminent breakthrough. Meng Hao's face paled a bit. Smiling, he flew past Fang Wei toward the teleportation portal. A complicated expression appeared on Fang Wei's face as he sensed his surging cultivation base and the all-heaven immortal energy inside of himself. As Meng Hao made his way off, just before he disappeared, Fang Wei called out, "Meng Hao, I'll wait for you to get back, and then the two of us are going to fight." "Very well," was the echoing reply. Then Meng Hao disappeared into the teleportation portal in a flash of light. "Therefore," Fang Wei murmured, "no matter what dangerous situations you run into, make sure to get back safely." He rose to his feet and headed back in the direction of the Medicine Immortal sect, eyes gleaming with an unswerving determination to sacrifice anything and everything for the sake of his clan. Meng Hao stepped out of a shimmering teleportation portal onto an asteroid field somewhere in the starry sky of the 9th mountain and sea. Slapping his bag of holding, he produced a thick stack of promissory notes. "So, who should I go collect money from first? I guess it doesn't matter. I have so many promissory notes, I guess I might as well just randomly pick one." Having made up his mind, he pulled a random note out and looked it over. "Taiyang Zai," he said, smiling. "Not bad, not bad. He owes me quite a few spirit stones." Face filled with anticipation, he clutched the promissory note in his hand as he shot toward the teleportation portal leading to Mount Sun. As soon as the disciples manning the teleportation portal saw that it was Meng Hao, their faces flickered. Ignoring them, Meng Hao stepped into the teleportation portal and was surrounded by the glowing light of teleportation. When he reappeared, he found himself in front of a world of scorching heat. It was like a desert, and there was no starry sky up above. This was its own unique, special world. The sky was dark, and the lands were parched. Countless mountains could be seen stretching out in all directions, all of which were spontaneously erupting volcanoes. In fact, in the moment that Meng Hao arrived, he saw a dozen or so of them belching out black smoke and shooting out bright glowing arcs of light that looked almost like meteors. This was Mount Sun. According to the legends, it was a fragment of land shattered by the impact of the immortal world sun when it fell from the heavens. Because it was so large, vast amounts of sun power could be found there, which was also why there were so many powerfully destructive volcanoes. That was also why it became a unique location to practice cultivation. Gradually, it came to be called Mount Sun, and after many years became one of the 5 great holy lands of the ninth mountain and sea. Different teleportation portals could be used to get into and out of Mount Sun, and all of them were manned by Mount Sun disciples. Once Meng Hao appeared, they immediately recognized him. That's Meng Hao. There were over 100 disciples in the area of the teleportation portal, and all of them looked at Meng Hao with flickering expressions. Although they weren't sure why he was here, they immediately pushed down on Jade slips to send messages to their superiors. Meng Hao coughed dryly and glanced around at the Mount Sun disciples, who were acting as though some powerful enemy had just shown up at their doorstep. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he gave them a bashful smile, then cleared his voice and called out, "Taeyang Zai, you owe me money. Time to pay up." His voice echoed out like thunder, causing wild colors to flash in heaven and earth, and a massive wind to spring up. Boundless ripples emanated out and surged through the world. Some of the volcanoes in the area quaked and then erupted, and the sky darkened as the heavens shook. Everyone in the entire world could hear Meng Hao's words. The Mount Sun disciples stared with wide-open jaws. Mount Sun was immediately thrown into a huge uproar, as countless disciples were flabbergasted by Meng Hao's voice. Chapter 1197, Stopping by to Demand Payment. Taeyang Zai, you owe me money, time to pay up. You owe me money, time to pay up. Time to pay up. The world in which Mount Sun existed seemed to be filled with countless Meng Haos, all of them shouting out at the same time. The mountains shook and the lands quaked. Countless cultivators were completely shocked. Most surprising of all were the actual words he spoke. Almost immediately, hundreds of furious cultivators flew out from one particular mountain deep within the world of Mount Sun. Collecting debt. Who dares to cause a ruckus in Mount Sun? Such audaciousness. All of the disciples headed in Meng Hao's direction. However, before they were even halfway to his location, one cultivator after another recognized who he was, and their faces fell. Meng Hao, damn it, I can't believe it's him. Greedy, miserly Meng Hao. Meng Hao was able to cut down Guru Heavencloud in battle, and also has a despicable Taoist magic that gets people to owe him money. It would be better to die than provoke him. Well, if it isn't my bro Meng Hao. Misunderstanding. Without the slightest hesitation, the group instantly turned on their heels and left. They recognized him and knew what kind of person he was. He was such a terrifying figure that none of them were willing to stand up for Taeyang Zai. Actually, not even Meng Hao himself was aware of how famous he had become in the ninth mountain and sea. Virtually, all of the cultivators knew him and did their best to avoid him. It was common knowledge that anyone who tangled with him would end up completely destitute. Meng Hao's cries continued to echo back and forth in the holy land of Mount Sun. Soon, in some of the most ancient volcanoes of Mount Sun, cultivators with the status of elders and even patriarchs opened their eyes to reveal cold, displeased gazes. These people had extremely high statuses and had lived for many years. As such, they held no approval for a youngster like Meng Hao. Meanwhile, at the bottom of an enormous volcano deep within Mount Sun, a young man sat cross-legged in meditation. He was naked from the waist up, and every inch of his skin glowed bright red. Clearly it contained terrifying power. Bulging blue veins snaked across his skin like dragons, and it seemed like there was some sort of explosive force building up inside him. On the young man's forehead, a mark could be seen that resembled a sun. This was none other than Taeyang Zai. It was just one of the many chosen that had emerged in the long history of the holy land of Mount Sun. Yet his latent talent was stunning, even more so than all the cultivators who had inherited the name Taeyang Zai before him. In terms of cultivation, he had long since broken through the traditional limitations for cultivators. He was now at the peak of the immortal realm, but in truth, he could easily battle the mid-ancient realm. Immortals like that were definitely rare in the ninth mountain and sea. As Taeyang Zai sat there cross-legged doing breathing exercises, Meng Hao's voice echoed about like thunder, reaching the depths of the world of Mount Sun. The volcanoes all trembled, erupting with lava and belching out smoke. The sky of Mount Sun quickly turned black. Taeyang Zai's eyes snapped open, as his volcano had a similar reaction. Meng Hao, he gritted his teeth in fury. He would never have imagined that Meng Hao would actually come to Mount Sun and say something like he just had. Show up in Taeyang Zai's home and openly demand money left him with no face whatsoever. This was especially the case considering that he didn't believe that he actually owed Meng Hao anything. The whole situation had been forced on him. Of course, He couldn't beat Meng Hao in a fight, so he was forced to simply endure the situation. But now, shockingly, Meng Hao had actually come to Mount Sun to settle up. Xianxia threw his head back and roared. His cultivation base surged with power, and he flew out of the volcano up into the sky, roaring out in an equally thunderous voice, "Meng Hao, you push people too far." From his position just outside the teleportation portal, Meng Hao could hear Xianxia, and his face lit up with delight. What he feared the most was going to collect debts, only to find the person not at home. Now that he knew Xianxia was home, he realized that he was in luck. Laughing heartily, he took a step forward and transformed into a bright beam of light that shot dazzlingly through the air toward Xianxia. However, even as he closed in, a cold snort echoed out from a nearby volcano, and an enormous hand appeared, which grabbed toward Meng Hao. "Cease this outburst, child. Get down here." The sound of the snort echoed about, and the enormous hand blotted out the sky as it crushed down toward Meng Hao. The hand even seemed to influence the natural laws in the area, causing everything to twist and distort. Meng Hao's eyes flickered coldly. Instead of falling back, he slammed directly into the hand, causing massive rumbling sounds to echo out. The hand collapsed, and Meng Hao remained hovering in midair, completely unharmed. "Me get down there. How about you come up here?" He extended his right hand and made a grasping motion toward the volcano down below. Land quaked, and the volcano rumbled as a bedraggled figure was wrenched up into the air. It was an old man in the great circle of the ancient realm, who looked completely flustered as he glared at Meng Hao. More cold harumphs could be heard from the surrounding volcanoes as 4 more old men appeared, all of them in the great circle of the ancient realm. Their energy surged, creating a spectacular scene as they flew out to suppress Meng Hao. "Ganging up on me," Meng Hao said coolly, waving his right hand, which caused the terracotta soldier to emerge from his bag of holding. It instantly grew to a huge size, sweeping its greatsword through the air, destroying a volcano before stabbing into the ground, which then quaked violently. When the ancient realm Mount Sun elders felt how powerful the attack of the terracotta soldier was, their faces fell and they instantly backed up. Even still, blood sprayed out of their mouths, and shocked expressions appeared on their faces. Quasar. That's the guardian of the Fang clan's ancestral land. It joined the battle when the Jai clan invaded planet East Victory. As they backed up, the terracotta soldier looked around, and its energy soared. Rumbling filled the air, and a huge wind sprang up that filled all of Mount Sun with the Quasar aura of the terracotta soldier. That aura caused all Mount Sun disciples' faces to fall and their bodies to tremble. The mad aura of a Quasar cultivation base was something they simply couldn't fight against. Any Quasar expert was to be feared. However, what was most terrifying was that even though the terracotta soldier could explode out with Quasar power, it had no longevity limitations. Xianxia gasped and his heart began to thump. He looked at Meng Hao, then at the enormous terracotta soldier, and then he sighed. Finally, he began to back up, and yet he wasn't as fast as Meng Hao. Meng Hao advanced, reaching out to grab a hold of Xianxia. "Xianxia, you're going to pay me what you owe today." "You're shameless, Meng Hao. I never owed you any money." Roaring in fury, Xianxia performed a double-handed incantation gesture, causing a divine ability to materialize and shoot toward Meng Hao. "I have proof. Your promissory note is right here. How dare you deny the truth?" Enraged, Meng Hao punched out, sending Xianxia flying back with blood spraying out of his mouth. Meng Hao was just about to follow up with another attack when the voice of an arrogant old man echoed out across the lands. "Even if your father came here, he would treat me with respect and call me senior. For you to come to Mount Sun and babble such nonsense might not be a capital offense, but you won't escape severe punishment. I suppose I'll just stand in for your father to administer some discipline. If we don't correct that personality of yours, sooner or later you're going to get yourself killed." As the voice rang out, an ancient and primeval volcano off in the distance erupted, and countless flickering magical symbols spewed out. A middle-aged man flew out, standing on a stream of smoking lava and a cloud of ash. When he emerged, the sky churned, and the air around him became a sea of flames which emanated an essence aura. This man was none other than one of the 3 Dao realm experts of Mount Sun. As far as he was concerned, it didn't matter why Meng Hao was here. He should politely offer his respects and say some pleasantries. If that had been the case, Mount Sun wouldn't necessarily refuse to hand over some spirit stones to resolve the issue with Xianxia. However, for Meng Hao to show up and act so tough was simply intolerable. In his mind, even if Meng Hao were stronger than he was, he couldn't do anything to cultivators in the Tao realm. Even the things which had happened on planet South Heaven recently were only because of the South Heaven death formation. After he finished speaking, the middle-aged man waved his finger in Meng Hao's direction. I call upon my Tao to unleash the magic of the heavens. Bind this child's body and burn him in the flames. In accompaniment with the man's coolly spoken words, the sea of flames behind him surged explosively toward Meng Hao, transforming into an enormous mouth that sought to consume him. Well, aren't you something, Mount Sun? I came to settle accounts, which is a right and proper thing to do. But in the end, the kids refuse to admit they owe money, and the adults refuse to discuss the matter reasonably. Enraged, Meng Hao waved his hand, causing the essence of divine flame to explode out in another sea of flames. This sea of flames also filled half of the sky and shot menacingly toward the Tao realm patriarch. Rumbling booms echoed out as the two seas of flame collided and then dissipated. Meng Hao grunted, but then took a step forward, causing his energy to rise as he charged toward the Tao realm patriarch. The man's face was pale and his eyes were wide. Meng Hao's power left him, completely astonished. When the Mount Sun disciples saw what was happening, they gasped. Even Taiyang Zai's eyes were wide, and his mind was spinning. This was their first time truly witnessing how powerful Meng Hao's cultivation base was. Taiyang Zai, are you gonna pay back what you owe or not? Meng Hao took a second step, and his energy rose, causing him to emanate what felt like the might of the heavens throughout the world of Mount Sun. Chapter 1198, Repay Your Kindness. Enough with the ruckus. The Tao realm patriarch's eyes glinted with coldness. Although he was shocked by Meng Hao's battle prowess, he still couldn't believe that he himself was no match for him. Although he wasn't of a mind to kill Meng Hao, he fully intended to teach him a lesson. Even as the words left his mouth, he took a step forward. As his foot descended, he stretched his arms wide, causing a tempest to spring up. All of the volcanoes in Mount Sun trembled, and the black smoke in the sky seethed and churned as they gathered towards him. Even the lava that covered the surface of the ground began to rise up into the air and converge together. In the blink of an eye, a huge sealing mark formed. It was bright red, and filled with Tao realm essence power that was strong enough to shatter heaven and destroy earth. Fully 300 meters wide, it floated there in front of the Tao realm patriarch, who then waved his hand, sending the sealing mark directly toward Meng Hao. I'll put you in your place and then call some adults from your clan to come take you away, he said coolly. The huge sealing mark rumbled through the air, bursting with essence power. A piddling one essence Tao realm cultivator like you dares to try and put me in my place. Meng Hao responded calmly. He truly qualified to say such a thing. If he unleashed his battle weapon, it would certainly be possible for him to cut this man down. But he was here to collect debt. Although this Tao realm patriarch was blocking his path, after some thought, Meng Hao realized that he should act in good faith and help Mount Sun consider the gains and losses that could be had. I might not have a sealing mark, but I have this. Eyeing the incoming sealing mark, he extended his right hand out into the air, making a snatching motion. Heaven and earth trembled, and the air in front of him collapsed as a land mass shot out from his palm. The piece of land started out very small, but in the next moment, it grew to the enormous size of 30,000 meters, blotting out the sky and casting everything into deep shadow. A boundlessly archaic aura emanated out from the land mass, as if it had existed for countless years of time. That land mass had apparently existed for innumerable eons, and even seemed to contain the will of a paragon. It wasn't the specific will of an individual paragon, though. It was the supreme will of the land mass itself. This 30,000-meter stretch of land was none other than a piece of the ruins of immortality, enormously heavy, and now being wielded by Meng Hao as if it were a magical item. Immediately, he sent it smashing down toward the sealing mark down below. Apparently, there was nothing in heaven and earth, nothing in the mountain and sea realm, no precious treasures that could remain unshaken by this land mass, and even if there were, the sealing mark was not one of them. The Tao realm patriarch's face fell as he saw the chunk of the ruins of immortality descending. That's part of the ruins of immortality. This is impossible. You actually have part of the ruins of immortality. It was a spectacular scene in which everything trembled violently. When the land mass smashed into the sealing mark, the mark trembled. Incapable of standing up to the attack, it collapsed, and the chunk of the ruins of immortality continued to rip through the air and then slammed down toward the ground. If it crashed into the ground, a large portion of the land would surely collapse. The ensuing earthquake would also cause all of the volcanoes in Mount Sun to erupt. Everything that was happening caused the Tao Realm Patriarch to gasp. How could he ever have predicted that Meng Hao would have a piece of the ruins of immortality? This fact only added to his astonishment. His heart had long since begun to pound wildly with shock. It was at this point that an ancient voice rang out from a distant volcano, filled with surprise. So, you actually have a piece of the ruins of immortality. In the blink of an eye, an old man had appeared beneath the ruins of immortality. After reaching his hand up and pushing against the descending land mass, he was shoved down several hundred meters before coming to a stop. He was able to resist the ruins of immortality with his power alone. The old man's explosive aura contained swirling essence power, not that of a single essence, but rather three. Shockingly, this old man was a three essences Tao Lord. After successfully collecting the power of three different essences, one was referred to as a Tao Lord. The old man's energy soared, and rumbling echoed out from his hand as he floated up, pushing the ruins of immortality back up into the air. Meng Hao, young friend, please put this thing away, the old man said, his eyes gleaming with somberness. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever. If there was no one in Mount Sun who could catch his chunk of the ruins of immortality, then they didn't qualify to be one of the 5 great holy lands. Even still, Meng Hao was convinced that if his piece of the ruins of immortality were larger, then even Tao Lords would be incapable of shouldering it. He waved his hand, and the land mass flew back into his bag of holding. Meng Hao looked at the old man and said, I came here today to collect some debts, not to duel with magic. The middle-aged Tao Realm Patriarch was apparently on the verge of saying something, but the old man silenced him with a look. The middle-aged man nodded, and the old man suddenly said, Taiyang. His voice echoed out like thunder, causing Taiyang to hurry forth and kowtow. Greetings, Patriarch, he said, head bowed. Inwardly, he was completely shaken to a heaven-shaking, earth-toppling degree. Although he knew that Meng Hao was powerful, he could never have imagined that he was strong enough to face off against Mount Sun's patriarchs. In fact, it was even appropriate to say that Meng Hao was now capable of shaking the entire 9th mountain and sea. With a cultivation base like that, now that he had come to settle accounts, there was nothing Taiyang could do other than smile bitterly. He wasn't sure whether to feel honored or to sigh. How much money do you owe our young friend Meng Hao? The old man growled. Taiyang opened his mouth but couldn't find any words. Deep depression filled his heart, and actually, he couldn't recall exactly how much he owed. After all, he had never admitted to actually owing Meng Hao anything. When Meng Hao saw what was happening, he coughed dryly and patted his bag of holding. Immediately, a stack of promissory notes appeared, which he began to shuffle through. Oh, not much, he said, kindly deciding to remind Taiyang of the amount. Let's see, the trifling sum of 1 million immortal jades, that's all. It wasn't that much, Taiyang blurted, trembling as he turned to look at Meng Hao. Even though Meng Hao's cultivation base was so much higher than his, this was too much for him to bear. There's interest on that too, Meng Hao said, clearing his throat seriously. All right, never mind, just give me the original amount, 1 million immortal jades, and we'll call things even. Taiyang wanted to cry, but no tears would come. You. He was about to continue speaking when the old man waved his hand, causing a bag of holding to fly out to Meng Hao. Meng Hao caught it and scanned it with divine sense. Inside were 1 million pieces of immortal jade, neatly arranged. Meng Hao immediately looked delighted. Putting the bag of holding away as quickly as possible, he clasped hands respectfully to the old man. Many thanks for presiding over justice, Senior. Well then, unless you have other business to discuss, I'll take off now. I still have quite a few other places to go collect debts. Waiting for too long will give them too much opportunity to prepare and make the accounts too difficult to settle. With that, he turned into a beam of light that shot back toward the teleportation portal, then vanished. Everyone in Mount Sun was completely silent, and many strange expressions could be seen. When Meng Hao vanished, there were many hearts that still blazed with rage at the utter humiliation which had just occurred. The middle-aged Tao Realm cultivator was one of those people, and stared coldly at Meng Hao the entire time until he disappeared. Finally, he turned to face the old man. Elder brother, why did you let that little bastard off the hook? Once word spreads, how will Mount Sun maintain any face? The old man frowned. Looking back at the middle-aged man, he sighed and said, Don't provoke him, he's a person we can't afford to rile up. The middle-aged man was about to say something when the old man suddenly transmitted a message into his mind. As soon as the middle-aged cultivator heard it, his face fell, and an expression of disbelief and shock filled his face. Voice hoarse, he said, "What? Is that true?" "Your cultivation base isn't sufficient," the old man said softly, "but with mine I can pick up on the clues. There's no other explanation. So, do you really want to provoke someone like that?" The middle-aged cultivator took a deep breath, then turned and spoke out loud. "Disciples of Mount Sun, from now on, none of you are to have any dealings with Meng Hao whatsoever. Do not incur debts of gratitude, nor should you sow any enmity. We must maintain a respectful distance from Meng Hao." Xianxia stared in shock. Although he wasn't sure what secret messages the two patriarchs had passed between each other, from the look of things, Meng Hao was harboring some incredible secret that was powerful enough to cause the two patriarchs from Mount Sun to fear him. Xiaoxi's heart was filled with many complicated emotions. He couldn't help but think about all the times he had interacted with Meng Hao. From the moment he had met him on planet South Heaven down to this day, Meng Hao was always in the lead and had transformed into an insurmountable mountain. The speed of his ascent was incredible, such that Xianxia could do nothing more than look up at him from down below. In the following days, all of the sects and clans in the Ninth Mountain and Sea were thrown into a huge commotion. All of them heard of or experienced what it was like to have Meng Hao come and settle accounts. Any chosen who had a promissory note in Meng Hao's hand would eventually find him at their doorstep, asking for money. All of the sects and clans were shaken by Meng Hao and his show of power. As a result, his debt collecting went fairly smoothly. After all, he was not the youngster that he had been in the past. He was now so powerful that he could rock Dao realm experts. Therefore, the trifling debt and the promissory notes prompted everyone to simply pay up. Even Meng Hao would never have guessed that his actions of collecting debt would quickly become the conversation topic of all the cultivators in the Ninth Mountain and Sea. Whenever he stepped out of a teleportation portal, everyone who caught sight of him instantly got excited. Word would spread, and countless cultivators would gather to personally watch him go to settle accounts. It was because of this that Meng Hao happened to step out of a teleportation portal at one point, and was instantly recognized. People then began to take out Jade slips to notify their sects of what was happening. Strange, there's no sect or clan in the vicinity of this teleportation station. This asteroid field is merely a transfer station. Look, his destination is actually near the Ninth Mountain. People looked on in confusion as Meng Hao vanished. When he reappeared, shockingly, he was walking out of another teleportation portal in another asteroid field. He looked up into the starry sky above him at a stretch of crumbled stone. Those bits of stone had once been complete, and when they had formed a bridge. That bridge had actually been constructed in the ancient demon immortal sect. It was the all-powerful bridge of immortal treading. In this case, it was Meng Hao who owed someone else. He owed a debt of gratitude. "Big bro Hanshan, I've come to repay your kindness," he said softly. Then his body flickered as he shot up into the starry sky. Chapter 1199. The Outrage of the Bridge of Immortality. The Bridge of Immortal Treading. 1. The Bridge of Immortal Treading arc started in Chapter 453. Meng Hao met Han Shan in Chapter 460, and the final arc in which Han Shan reunited with his wife began in Chapter 468. At one time, it was a majestic bridge that spanned the starry sky, constructed by the ancient demon immortal sect. But then, in the war waged by Jai Tian, it was destroyed. That was the bitter, bloody war which was fought when the Jai clan betrayed the ancient demon immortal sect. During that war, the ancient demon immortal sect was completely destroyed, and Blood Demon was seriously injured. With his life force mortally damaged, he fled to planet South Heaven, where he was forced to divide his nascent divinity and become a clone. The war also saw the body of the Frost Soil Demon Emperor destroyed, and his soul collapsed. Only a tiny aspect of his soul managed to escape and was later reincarnated. Mysteriously, no reports surfaced of the Withering Flame Demon Emperor having died. No one knew what fate he met by the time the war ended. The Fang clan led the resistance against the Jai clan, vying with them for the lordship of the Ninth Mountain and Sea. Even after the ancient demon immortal sect was laid to waste, the fighting continued to go on for years. Eventually, the Eighth Mountain and Sea was drawn into the conflict. Two great mountains and seas fought battle after battle. In the end, Jai Tian secured victory, becoming the new lord of the Ninth Mountain and Sea. The Mountain and Sea War ended. The Civil War was over. Such historical facts were common knowledge among cultivators of the Ninth Mountain and Sea. Furthermore, the ruins of the Bridge of Immortal Treading bore testimony to the brutality and carnage of the war. Nowadays, all that remained of the bridge was this seemingly endless stretch of rubble floating out in the starry sky. The stones clung together, and from a distance, the general shape of a bridge was still visible. It was part of the history of the Ninth Mountain and Sea, and cultivators were drawn there to struggle in search of good fortune. Some people entered the ruins, never to return. Others acquired the luck they sought, and from then on their life courses drastically changed. Meng Hao had been here once as a mere spirit realm cultivator. This was where he had met Xianxia and was also where he had encountered a benefactor. Han Shan. He was the reincarnation of the ancient demon immortal sex frost soil demon emperor, Han Shan. Han Shan's wife had been eternally imprisoned within the Bridge of Immortal Treading, and Han Shan had been willing to pay any price to come to this place, find her, and awaken her from her state of sleep. Were he unable to do so, then he was willing to remain there forever with his wife. He gave his sword, his alcohol flagon, and his frost soil to Meng Hao, connecting them with ties of destiny. He had helped Meng Hao succeed in his efforts, and had also created a bit of hope for himself and his wife. At that time, Meng Hao had promised that when he achieved his Tao, he would come to repay the kindness. Han Shen knew that if Meng Hao was the type of person to honor his promises, then he would definitely come back. If Meng Hao was not that type of person, then there was nothing that could be done about the matter. Such future matters were impossible to predict. Back then, Han Shen had no idea what would happen in the end. Perhaps if Han Shan had remained conscious, he would have occasionally thought about Meng Hao's promise. Or maybe he would have forgotten about the ray of hope that he had given himself, which came from the opportunity he had given Meng Hao. The truth of the matter was that Meng Hao would never forget the people who had helped him, nor would he forget the promises he had made. Never would he forget guiding Tri-Rain, nor Han Shan. The promises he had made them existed eternally within his memory. "Achieve the Tao, fulfill my promise," he murmured, transforming into a prismatic streak of light that shot up into the starry sky. "Although I haven't truly achieved my Tao," he said softly, "I can still take a shot at freeing Big Bro Han Shan and his wife." When he entered the region of the Bridge of Immortality, the excited cultivators who had been following him were quite confused. They couldn't imagine why Meng Hao would come to this place. Could it have something to do with the Jai clan? That bridge was destroyed by Jai Tian years ago. As people made their speculations, Meng Hao passed into the bridge, shooting along without even a pause. He was not the only person inside the Bridge of Immortal Treading. Other cultivators were there, all of them in the spirit realm, come from other planets to participate in various trials by fire. It was just the same as when he had come here years ago. Meng Hao flew through the various crushed stones that made up the Bridge of Immortal Treading, revisiting places that he remembered from the past. He flew along silently, traveling ever deeper into the ruins. He saw cultivators, some competing, some cooperating as they sought after good fortune. As he passed familiar places, he thought about his own experiences in the past. He did nothing to interfere with any of the cultivators he saw, nor did they even see him as he passed by. They continued on with their struggles and fights, completely oblivious. He followed the same path he remembered taking last time. As he proceeded along, he soon realized that there was nobody else present in the locations he had visited formerly. He didn't stop to check if there was potential good fortune available. His only goal was to repay the debt of gratitude. Soon, a land mass of broken rocks appeared up ahead, and the color of frost soil became evident. Meng Hao had finally reached the depths of the Bridge of Immortal Treading, the place where he had watched as Han Shan found his wife. The only difference was that now that he had once again returned, there were none of the soulless bridge slaves in sight. All he saw was boundless frost soil. But then he spotted a cliff in the center of that soil. Sitting atop that cliff were a man and a woman. The woman was leaning up against the man's shoulder. Her eyes were closed, and a faint smile could be seen on her face. She seemed very content. The man's hand was intertwined with her beautiful hair, and he was looking down at her, also smiling. It was a tender, beautiful sight, and anyone who looked at it would be able to see how much they cared for each other. However, they were surrounded by seemingly endless frost soil, even the cliff, all of which looked like a deep blue block of ice. The ice did not emanate any coldness, and yet it seemed to be sealing them, eternally preserving the two people where they sat. Apparently, the will of his wife's soul was also sealed there. Meng Hao walked up silently and stood next to the cliff, looking at the man and the woman. Their familiar faces instantly gave rise to numerous memories. "Big bro Han Shan," he said, his voice hoarse. Considering the level of his cultivation base, he could tell at a glance that Han Shan had sealed himself here intentionally. Rather than live on soullessly, he had somehow used the power of the Frost Soil Demon Emperor to seal both himself and his wife. There they would sit, waiting quietly for a future day when they might awaken. Meng Hao looked at the man and the woman sitting there on the cliff and softly said, "Unless I can dispel all outrage of the Bridge of Immortal Treading, then even if I am able to undo this seal, Big Bro Han Shan and his wife will have to remain here silently, year after year, unable to leave." The outrage of the Bridge of Immortal Treading was born because of the Jai clan. It would require a sacrifice of Jai clan blood to dispel. Unfortunately, I don't have the power to do that right now. I can only try to use my cultivation base to shake the Bridge of Immortal Treading. Maybe I can force it to submit. He took a deep breath and sat down cross-legged beneath the cliff. He closed his eyes, rotated his cultivation base, and drew upon the power of an all-heaven immortal. Explosive azure light immediately began to shine out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the light shone for 30,000 meters, creating an entire world of azure light. At the same time, the Bridge of Immortal Treading began to tremble. Just as Meng Hao had said, he would make an attempt using his own cultivation base to try to shake the bridge and wipe out its outrage. As his divine sense spread out to fill the area, his hands flashed in a double-handed incantation gesture, and then he pushed them down onto the ground. Massive rumbling could be heard, rolling out in all directions to fill the entire bridge, with Meng Hao at the center. All of the stones that made up the Bridge of Immortal Treading were shaking, and soon, heaven shaking, earth-shattering shouting could be heard from each one. The shouts occurred so abruptly that all of the cultivators participating in trials by fire were shocked, and their faces fell. Next, images which appeared to be souls rose up from the stones. Those numerous souls were all parts of the soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading. They floated up from each stone and then rapidly flew together, converging into the actual soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading. It floated there above the ruins of the bridge, emanating an indescribable pressure filled with outrage and unyielding hatred that descended upon Meng Hao. Meng Hao's eyes snapped open, shining brightly as he looked up at the vengeful soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading. "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust," Meng Hao said. "There's no reason to be like this. Don't take your anger out on the wrong people. Please allow these two people here to leave." His voice echoed out throughout the entire Bridge of Immortal Treading, causing all of the cultivators who heard it to stare around in wordless shock. From what they could tell, some almighty expert had descended from the starry sky to force the bridge into capitulation. They weren't the only shocked ones. The cultivators who had been following Meng Hao earlier also looked around with wide eyes, completely shaken. They could see the soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading, and they could sense the boundless outrage and animosity radiating off of it. All of a sudden, they realized why Meng Hao had come here. He's actually going to try to use his own power to dispel the outrage of the Bridge of Immortal Treading. This bridge's outrage will last for all eternity. The bridge hates the Jai clan and is outraged at the Ninth Mountain and Sea. It is that very outrage which allows it to stay in the rough form of a bridge, despite having been destroyed. This Meng Hao might be powerful, but how could it be so easy to dispel the outrage of the Bridge of Immortal Treading? It was at this point that the soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading, radiating boundless, sinister light, formed into an enormous face which then glared at Meng Hao. "No," it roared, the single word transforming into a shockwave, a windstorm that swept explosively through the bridge toward Meng Hao. "Your outrage has nothing to do with me," Meng Hao said slowly. "I came here to take away these two people. If you agree, fine. If you disagree, I don't care. I'm going to take them." He waved his arm, causing the entire starry sky to tremble as yet another bridge suddenly appeared. That bridge abounded with the energy of a paragon. This was Meng Hao's paragon magic, his paragon bridge. He planned to use the paragon bridge to subdue the Bridge of Immortal Treading. Chapter 1200, Absorbing the Bridge of Immortal Treading. Rumbling echoed out as the entire Bridge of Immortal Treading shook, and the enormous face roared. Towering killing intent rose up from the bridge, materializing in the form of 8 huge hands that shot toward Meng Hao. "Die!" the huge face howled. All of the cultivators participating in trials by fire on the bridge were completely shaken, and the people out in the starry sky were equally astonished. They looked on in complete disbelief as the 8 arms bore down on Meng Hao from all directions. The 8 hands were born of outrage and were filled with madness. Any one of them would be shocking on its own, and currently they were just on the verge of slamming into Meng Hao. His eyes flashed, and he snorted coldly as he pushed his hand downward. The gesture caused the land to quake, and immortal mountains and divine flame to appear up above. The mountains slammed into the hands, causing a deafening roar to echo out. The hands fought back, causing everything to shake violently. At the same time, Meng Hao's Paragon Bridge began its descent. When it slammed into the soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading, the soul issued a miserable howl, and the Bridge of Immortal Treading shook intensely. Meng Hao's plan was to use the Paragon Bridge to suppress the Bridge of Immortal Treading. He wished that he could sate the Bridge of Immortal Treading's outrage with the blood of the Jai clan, but with his current cultivation base, that was impossible. However, once he left the 9th mountain and sea, there was no telling when he might return. Although there was no time limit attached to his promise to Han Shan, the way Meng Hao saw it, if at any point he had the ability to resolve his obligations and thus free himself, he would not put it off any longer than necessary. As the Paragon Bridge descended, the soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading let out a frenzied shout. No! The gigantic face looked at the Paragon Bridge and screamed with grief and madness. The Paramita Bridge, the Paramita Bridge, it cried. Meng Hao gaped in shock and a tremor ran through him. As he looked closely, he suddenly realized that the Bridge of Immortal Treading and the Paragon Bridge actually looked similar. Although both were merely bridges and would naturally have similar aspects, the feeling they gave off made it seem like one was an imitation of the other. Even some of the ornamentations on the bridges were similar. Meng Hao had never noticed before, because the Bridge of Immortal Treading was in a state of collapse. However, now that the 2 bridges were next to each other, it was immediately apparent. Paragon Bridge, Bridge of Immortal Treading. His eyes gleamed brightly. The Bridge of Immortal Treading, built all those years ago by the ancient demon Immortal sect, was actually an imitation of my Paragon Bridge. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say that it was an imitation of the bridge that I had committed to memory in the depths of my heart, the bridge from which I gained enlightenment regarding my Paragon magic, the Paramita Bridge. Meng Hao's eyes went wide as countless implications of this coincidence ran through his head. He suddenly shot to his feet and waved his arm, causing the pressure from the Paragon Bridge to increase in intensity and causing azure light to begin to emanate from it. Rumbling could be heard as the soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading howled in its attempts to fight back. However, under the pressure of the Paragon Bridge, the shattered remnants that formed the Bridge of Immortal Treading were completely shaken. From the look of things, the stones themselves were trying to free themselves from the force that kept them confined to the Bridge of Immortal Treading, attempting to fly up and be absorbed by the Paragon Bridge. It was as if a counterfeit had met the original and could not prevent itself from being sucked in. Furthermore, one of the most important aspects to the whole situation was that Meng Hao's Paragon Bridge was not complete. What he had seen back in the ruins of immortality was a mere section. It was only by collecting all the insights he had gained during his enlightenment into creating his Paragon magic that he could barely produce a complete bridge. However, Meng Hao knew that he had never actually witnessed the entirety of the bridge, and thus his Paragon magic, despite appearing whole, was actually incomplete. But now, he had come across a stupendous opportunity and good fortune. If my Paragon Bridge can absorb this imitation that is the Bridge of Immortal Treading, and thus become complete, then it will be far more powerful than before. Most importantly, if I can do that, then I won't need to dispel its outrage to free Big Bro Han Shan. That will be because, if I succeed, there will no longer be any Bridge of Immortal Treading. Meng Hao took a deep breath. What a bizarre and miraculous place the world was. If he had not come back here to pay his debt of gratitude, he would never have come across this opportunity for spectacular good fortune. Big Bro Han Shan, you don't need to wait for me to destroy the Jai clan to dispel the outrage of the Bridge of Immortal Treading. I can save you and your wife. Today, eyes shining with this new enlightenment, he now felt even more confident in being able to rescue Han Shan and his wife. Rumbling could be heard as the huge face that was the soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading roared and struggled madly in its fight against the pressure of the Paragon Bridge. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as he moved forward and suddenly appeared atop the Paragon Bridge. There he took a single step forward. In that instant, the entire Paragon Bridge trembled, and the azure light shone boundlessly. The power of the pressure increased, causing the soul of the bridge of immortal treading to twist viciously and struggle even harder. After all, the Paragon Bridge was incomplete, and Meng Hao was not yet in the Tao realm. Furthermore, the bridge of immortal treading had existed for countless years, and although it had been suppressed, it was still explosively powerful. Despite that power, the bridge was still fragmented and held together only by the outrage born from its destruction. As the bridge trembled violently, suddenly, a few pieces began to rise up toward the Paragon Bridge. They were absorbed into it, causing the pressure from the Paragon Bridge to grow stronger. Within the azure light shone beams of whiteness, emanating out from the Paragon Bridge itself. Apparently, those extra pieces it had just absorbed made it more complete and real. Meng Hao's face brightened. Based on what was happening, it appeared that his theory was correct. The day that the Paragon Bridge will be completely rebuilt is this very day. He waved his sleeve and took a second step forward. Rumbling echoed out, and the pressure from the Paragon Bridge increased. As the soul of the bridge of immortal treading howled and struggled to free itself, brilliant colors flashed about. No matter how hard it fought, though, it was unable to prevent another piece of stone from flying up, then a second, and a third. 20 pieces, 50 pieces, 100 pieces. Gradually, more and more stones flew up to be absorbed by the Paragon Bridge. The scene which was playing out in front of all the various cultivators left them completely astonished. That was especially true of the cultivators who were actually on the bridgestones. They felt like they were in a living nightmare, and unprecedented levels of terror rose up in them. The image of Meng Hao standing on top of that bridge was something they would never forget for the rest of their lives. Even if their cultivation bases rose higher and higher until they reached the Tao realm, and they became patriarchs, they would never be able to forget that picture of Meng Hao and his bridge. Every step he took caused proverbial lotuses to blossom, as if he were the most supreme existence in the world. Meng Hao didn't want to make things difficult for those cultivators, so as the stones flew up into the air, the cultivators were picked up by a gentle force and taken to float out in the void, unharmed. More intense rumbling could be heard as Meng Hao took a third step, then a fourth and a fifth. Countless bridgestones rose up to merge into the Paragon Bridge, causing it to become even more majestic and real. The pressure it radiated became even more intense and impossible to withstand, causing the bridge of immortal treading to sink down, and the soul of the bridge of immortal treading to begin to break apart. It had existed for many years, and could never have imagined that one day it would meet someone who would come against it with the Paragon Bridge, and could actually subdue and exert such a firm grip over it. No, the soul howled. Its energy surged, transforming into an attack which blasted the Paragon Bridge, causing a rumbling boom to echo out. The Paragon Bridge trembled, and Meng Hao's eyes shone with a strange light. Stones of the bridge of immortal treading returned to the Paragon Bridge. Henceforth, you will no longer be the bridge of immortal treading. Instead, you will become part of the Paragon Bridge. You will only have this opportunity once, Meng Hao said, boosting his voice with his cultivation base, imbuing it with the will of the Paragon Bridge. Bridge of immortal treading, hurry up and return. The time to act is now. The void trembled, and the bridge of immortal treading suddenly exploded. Its bridge-like shape no longer existed, and countless stone fragments transformed into beams of light that shot from their place in the void, directly toward the Paragon Bridge. 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, innumerable bridgestones flew up into the air. The surrounding cultivators were flabbergasted and were immediately sent into a commotion. He's taking away the bridge of immortal treading. He's not taking it away, he's consuming and absorbing it. This Meng Hao, he's simply too powerful. All of the stones that made up the bridge of immortal treading were now floating up, and the void itself was distorted, as if the starry sky were about to collapse. As the Paragon Bridge absorbed them, it glowed with increasingly powerful light and its energy rocketed up. The pressure grew stronger, far stronger than before. The entire starry sky trembled as boundless ripples flowed out in all directions. Even more shocking was that the Paragon Bridge was now emanating an aura that didn't seem to be part of the mountain and sea realm. It was as if its will were awakening. In fact, the will of the Paragon Bridge was actually the will of the Paramita Bridge. A will of heaven trampling. 1. In Chapter 1122, Slaughter, the apparently Paragon-level entity inside of Tao Heaven's Paragon painting, saw Meng Hao's Paragon Bridge and called it heaven-trampling bridge that will cause the entire ninth mountain and sea to rumble. Then the eighth mountain and sea was affected. After that, the seventh mountain and sea, and then the entire mountain and sea realm. At the peaks of the 9 mountains, within the 9 pools of water, 9 holy Xianxia turtles suddenly let out a powerful howl. It was almost exactly the same as when the outsider from the 33 heavens had appeared. Chapter 12:01, Son of the Mountains and Seas. As the 9 Xianxia turtles howled, a cold, emotionless voice suddenly echoed out into the minds of the lords of the 9 mountains and seas. The Paramita Bridge has awakened. Destroy it. Eradicate its life force. It must not become complete. Simultaneously, the sun and moon flickered with explosive destructive power. Back in the former location of the Bridge of Immortal Treading, the bridgestones continued to fuse into the Paragon Bridge, causing its energy to rise up explosively. Meng Hao stood atop it, completely steady despite how violently it was shaking. His eyes gleamed with a strange light as he suddenly realized something. There are 2 stages to Paragon magics. The first is the illusory stage and the second is the corporeal stage. Only by advancing the Paragon magic to the corporeal stage can it truly explode with power. In fact, that power depends on the physical Paragon object. Having Paragon magic means you can join the echelon. By advancing the Paragon magic to the corporeal, you transcend the echelon. As Meng Hao gained this new enlightenment, his echelon mark appeared on his forehead, flickering brilliantly. As it glowed, it began to transform. Apparently, he was moving beyond the echelon, turning into a completely unique entity in the mountain and sea realm. The soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading, seeing that it could do nothing to stop what was happening, let out a maddened roar. Eyes blazing, it cried, "I refuse to accept this. If I can absorb the Paramita Bridge, then I'll finally be free. I can escape from this sea of bitterness and be like the fish who jumped over the dragon gate." The face that represented the soul howled as it ceased resisting and actually shot directly toward the Paragon Bridge. This was its ultimate decision. It would try to possess the Paragon Bridge to take its place. Such an outcome wasn't an impossibility. After all, it was born from the outrage of the Bridge of Immortal Treading and was actually a soul automaton. The soul of the replica was trying to possess the object after which it had been fashioned, to take its place. Rumbling could be heard as the soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading merged into the Paragon Bridge. Meng Hao could do nothing to stop it, and in the blink of an eye, it was part of the Paragon Bridge. Everything was shaking violently as the Bridge of Immortal Treading completely vanished from the starry sky. Numerous cultivators in the area were pushed away from the vicinity, and the cultivators who had come to watch were staring wide-eyed. There was now only one bridge in the starry sky, and that was Meng Hao's Paragon Bridge. However, the Paragon Bridge was trembling as its aura rose up. The soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading was trying to possess it in an attempt to become the soul of the Paragon Bridge. "I can allow you to become the soul of the Paragon Bridge," Meng Hao said. A roaring response could be heard from the Paragon Bridge. "I don't need you to allow me. I can do it myself." A powerful force battered away at the connection between Meng Hao and the Paragon Bridge, trying to separate it from Meng Hao and turn it into an independent entity. It was attempting to do the same thing that Meng Hao had done to the Paragon painting of the first Mountain's Echelon cultivator, to break it away from him permanently. Meng Hao's eyes flickered, and he was about to unleash all his power to suppress it, when suddenly, an intense sensation of imminent crisis welled up in him. Looking up, he could sense a powerful force of expulsion coming from the mountain and sea realm itself. A huge power was coming, a power that would destroy the Paragon Bridge that was still in the midst of awakening and being completed. Meng Hao's face flickered. Although he wanted to put away the Paragon Bridge, because of the soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading, he could not. Suddenly, he shot backward, moving to the location on the Paragon Bridge where Han Shan and his wife were. He quickly waved his hand to set up a shield around them, then looked out into the starry sky, his eyes shining with a strange light. He even stopped trying to prevent the soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading from interfering with his connection to the Paragon Bridge, and he looked up into the starry sky and caught sight of a beam of light. That light was caused because of the roaring of the 9 Xianxia turtles and was killing intent from the sun and moon. An all-destructive arrow of light pierced through the starry sky, slamming into the Paragon Bridge to destroy it. The Paragon Bridge started shaking, and because it was born from Meng Hao's magic, Meng Hao also trembled and coughed up a mouthful of blood. However, the soul of the Bridge of Immortal Treading was even more seriously wounded. The bridge soul let out a blood-curdling scream, and the entire Paragon Bridge shook. Massive destructive power washed over it, and the bridge soul could feel the menacing threat of death. "Do you surrender or not?" Meng Hao suddenly said. "Surrender and become mine. A single thought on my part can make you the soul of the Paragon Bridge. Refuse to surrender, and you'll be destroyed by the power of the mountains and seas." Meng Hao was now using the power of the mountains and seas to threaten the soul. "I'll die before I surrender," the bridge soul howled. "If I die, the bridge will be destroyed and you'll be wiped out too." Suddenly, a second arrow of light appeared, even more powerful and terrifying than the previous one. It slammed into the bridge, shattering the azure light, overwhelming the white light, and causing the entire Paragon Bridge to tremble and begin to fall apart once again. The rising energy was interrupted, and Meng Hao coughed up more blood. As he fought back against the power, the bridge soul screamed and weakened even further. It could not withstand a third arrow. "I'll give you one last chance," he said, eyes shining. "Yield to me and become my bridge soul. I, Meng Hao, swear an oath that I will use the blood of the Jai Tian to resolve your blood feud. I will help you resolve your outrage. If you don't take advantage of this opportunity, then I'll watch as the power of the mountains and seas obliterates you." Even as the words left his mouth, a third arrow of light appeared off in the distance. It looked like a sun, and the entire starry sky of the ninth mountain and sea trembled from the ripples which emanated off of it. It seemed to contain a power that could shake heaven and earth, that would destroy anything with a single strike. The bridge soul trembled. In this critical life-or-death moment of crisis, it let out a miserable cry. "Even if I yield to you, I'll still be killed by that power. You'll still abandon the bridge to save yourself. I die either way." "I won't abandon the Paragon Bridge," Meng Hao said with decisiveness that could sever nails and chop iron. "If you yield, I'll make sure you will not perish." The bridge soul shivered. Considering it was about to be destroyed, it had little choice. It immediately opened itself up. Meng Hao unleashed his divine sense, borrowing strength from the Paragon Bridge to leave his mark on the bridge soul. That mark was now indelibly branded into the soul, never to be removed. "Now let's see how you keep your promise," the bridge soul roared. As soon as Meng Hao marked it, it had no need to attempt to possess the Paragon Bridge, nor any reason to interfere with Meng Hao's connection to it. The Paragon Bridge approved of the bridge soul, allowing it to fill the bridge. Instantly, the bridge's power exploded with incredible might. Now that it was marked, it became part of Meng Hao. Furthermore, there was now absolutely no way for the Paragon Bridge to leave Meng Hao's control. Regardless of whether it was illusory or corporeal, that fact would never change. You could even say that the Paragon Bridge, having absorbed the bridge of immortal treading, now had the good fortune to one day become completely corporeal. The next step is to go to the ruins of immortality and absorb the entire section of the real Paragon Bridge. Meng Hao thought, eyes gleaming. At long last, he understood the path of the Paragon. By this point, the third arrow of light had almost arrived. The bridge soul trembled as Meng Hao stepped off of the Paragon Bridge, placing himself directly in the arrow's path. Then he lifted his right hand and pushed it toward the arrow. That movement caused a tremor to run through the bridge soul. How could it ever have imagined that Meng Hao would do something like this, stand up directly to the power of the mountains and seas? "He's crazy," whispered the bridge soul. However, what happened in the next moment caused the bridge soul to gape in complete disbelief. That was because the arrow slowed to stop directly in front of Meng Hao. "I call upon the authority of my status to order you to return whence you came," he said softly, eyes blazing with determination. Although his hand did not possess the power to resist the arrow, his voice was like an unbreakable barrier that made his hand completely and thoroughly impenetrable. The arrow stopped as if it didn't dare to pierce through it. A cold voice spoke out into Meng Hao's mind, echoing like thunder. "The Paramita Bridge may exist. However, to prevent anything untoward from occurring with this particular awakened bridge, it will be destroyed." "This bridge is my Paragon magic. Nothing untoward will occur," Meng Hao said coolly. "According to the law, the bridge may not. If I say nothing untoward will occur, nothing will. Back down." As he spoke, he caused the drop of Paragon's blood inside of him to suddenly flare up. Its aura spread out, not much, but enough to completely shock the 9 Chuanwu turtles on the tops of the 9 mountains. The cold voice that represented the will of the mountain and sea realm was also astonished. The arrow trembled and the cold voice fell silent. Meng Hao said nothing more. He simply stood there and even let his hand drop to his side. Behind him, the bridge soul inside the Paragon Bridge was staring in shock. After a moment, the cold voice once again echoed out into Meng Hao's mind. The orders of the son of the mountains and seas shall be followed. The arrow slowly faded away, transforming into motes of glittering light that spread out into the void. Meng Hao breathed a sigh of relief. Everything that had just happened had been a gamble, considering he wasn't sure exactly how much control he could wield over the mountain and sea realm. Son of the mountains and seas, he thought, smiling slightly. He liked the sound of that title. As he turned, the mark on his forehead completed its transformation. Shockingly, it now depicted 9 mountains which flashed briefly before vanishing. The bridge soul inside the Paragon Bridge said nothing, but it now felt unprecedented respect and awe for Meng Hao. It did nothing at all to resist him, and when he waved his hand, the bridge slowly faded away. Now the only thing that remained in the starry sky was a floating block of ice. Within that ice were Han Shan and his wife. They looked just like they had before, sitting there together, leaning up against each other. Gradually, the ice began to melt. After the time it takes an incense stick to burn, Han Shan shuddered, then looked up in confusion at Meng Hao. As soon as Han Shan looked at him, a smile broke out on Meng Hao's face. Clasping hands, he bowed deeply and said, "Big bro Han Shan, I'm happy to say that I've fulfilled your request." Chapter 12:02, Forever and Ever. The starry sky was now completely silent. As for the spirit realm cultivators who had been on the bridge participating in trials by fire and who were now scattered about in space, Meng Hao assisted them and encouraged the other cultivators who had followed him to do the same. These cultivators who had borne witness to the vanishing of the bridge of immortal treading and the subsequent rise of the Paragon Bridge agreed with the request and began to send the spirit realm cultivators back to their respective sects. Everything was brought to a perfect conclusion, and Meng Hao repaid his debt of gratitude. Not only were Han Shan and his wife saved, but Meng Hao's Paragon Bridge underwent shocking transformations. Now Meng Hao stood there, smiling warmly at Han Shan, thinking about everything that had happened so many years ago. At first Han Shan looked confused, but gradually his eyes grew clear. His wife shivered as she woke up and also looked around blankly. Then she saw her husband and the blankness vanished to be replaced with a gentle gaze. It was as if, no matter where she was or what hardships would come along as Han Shan was there, she would be fine. Han Shan slowly rose to his feet, looking around for a moment before his gaze came to fall on Meng Hao. An expression of appreciation appeared in his eyes and he laughed. "Have any alcohol?" Meng Hao smiled and waved his hand. The alcohol flagon that Han Shan had given him years ago flew out. Han Shan grabbed it, threw his head back and took a long swig. Han Shan lowered the alcohol flagon and looked seriously at Meng Hao. "Young friend, I will remember this great kindness which you have shown us for all eternity." He didn't mention anything about Meng Hao freeing him. Giving voice to thanks wasn't important. What was important was that he had not been mistaken to place his trust in Meng Hao. What was important was that he and his wife had both been saved, and he now owed Meng Hao 2 lives. That was something that Han Shan would never forget. Meng Hao shook his head. "I had no choice in the matter, big bro Han Shan. I had to do it. Didn't I say I would?" He looked at Han Shan and his wife, and could see how happy they were. Han Shan said nothing more. He simply stepped forward and embraced Meng Hao. "No need to draw things out, bro," he said. "Suffice to say, if you need us, my wife and I will be there for you, together." He and Meng Hao laughed heartily. Han Shan's wife stood off to the side, watching them silently, her eyes filled with appreciation. Soon it was time to part, and Meng Hao suggested that Han Shan and his wife go settle down on planet South Heaven, and even gave them the appropriate identity medallions to go there. Han Shan was not of a mind to refuse. Now that he had his wife back, it didn't matter where they went. Since planet South Heaven was Meng Hao's home, Han Shan was more than willing to go there. Meng Hao watched Han Shan and his wife leave. Soon, the flash of a teleportation portal could be seen, and they vanished. At that point, Meng Hao turned and looked one last time at the place previously occupied by the Bridge of Immortal Treading. Then he turned and headed toward another teleportation portal. This time, he was not going to collect money from anyone. Instead, he was going to the Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum. The Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum was also one of the 5 great holy lands, and was where his childhood friend Fatty lived. Although by this point it would probably be less appropriate to call Li Fugui simply Fatty, he now deserved to be called Big Fatty. He was now so fat that it would take 4 people to wrap their arms around him. However, he was still quite lively, and his teeth were sharper than ever. The paleo-immortal mausoleum had treated him well, and he was already an immortal. When it came to his beloved partners, he actually had quite a few more than before. No longer did he only have 100, now he had 500. When Meng Hao got to the paleo-immortal mausoleum and announced his intentions, Fatty came rolling out like a ball. When Meng Hao laid eyes on him, his jaw dropped. "Biggest bro, you finally came to see me," Fatty roared, racing over to hug Meng Hao. Unfortunately, his belly was too big and his arms weren't long enough, making an embrace impossible. When the huge belly bumped into Meng Hao, he stumbled backward, laughing awkwardly. He looked over the sphere that was Fatty and started to get a bit worried. However, after scanning him with divine sense and seeing the level of his cultivation base, he felt a bit better. "You should eat less," Meng Hao said with a wry smile as Fatty led him into the paleo-immortal mausoleum. Of course, the sect itself could by no means ignore the arrival of Meng Hao and went all out to receive him. Even one of the Dao realm patriarchs emerged. Meng Hao decided to stay there for several days, during which time he and Fatty would reminisce, talking about old times and wonderful memories. On one occasion after they had been drinking and talking for a while, Fatty started crying. He told Meng Hao that he missed his father and mother and had even gone back to planet South Heaven on several occasions. However, the state of Zhao was gone, and he had never been able to track them down. He knew that even if he did manage to find them, his parents had probably long since passed on, and the rest of the members of his household would have gone their separate ways. However, he still missed them, and in fact, as time passed, that feeling had grown even stronger. In fact, sometimes he felt like it didn't matter that he could live for such a long time and had such a thriving harem. He still wished that his parents could be around. Seeing Fatty weeping in this way caused Meng Hao to sigh. However, all he could do was sit there listening and drinking. Apparently, Fatty hadn't had a chance to vent in quite a while. After crying for a bit, he started chuckling again, and soon they were talking about the Reliance sect. That had been one of the happiest times of Fatty's life. Eventually, they started reminiscing about the vendor booth they had set up, and Meng Hao couldn't help but laugh out loud. Fatty joined him, and soon their laughter was echoing out. However, it was impossible to talk about the Reliance sect and not bring up the subject of Su Qing. Fatty sighed. "You know, of the four of us who elder sister Su took to the Reliance sect, Wang Yaokai has turned out to be the fiercest. He really shook things up over at Moonset Lake. They call him the Devil-Eyed Killer. He's really famous. As for me, I'm pretty useless, although I managed to get by. But biggest bro, well, I don't even need to talk about that, do I? And there's Dong Hu. I'm not sure what happened to him. He seems to have vanished without a trace. Now that I think about it, elder sister Su had some excellent powers of foresight. Oh right, Meng Hao, remember that cave back on Mount Daqing and how you threw that vine down? Ha ha ha, I guess you got lucky, didn't you? Otherwise you would never have been taken to the Reliance sect." Meng Hao cleared his throat. The things Fatty was talking about caused him to recall everything that had happened back then. After failing the imperial exams another time, he had gone for a walk on Mount Daqing, sighing to himself about his life. Back then, how could he ever have imagined that heading up the mountain that day would completely change his life? The world had lost a scholar that day and gained a cultivator, and the mountain and sea realm had gained its future lord. When Su Qing's name came up, Meng Hao thought about the Red Wedding, and his mood sank. He finally told Fatty that he was going to the fourth mountain to get her back. Fatty could see that Meng Hao's mood was sinking, so he quickly waved his sleeve, calling to a young woman who stood off in the distance. She approached, clasped hands, and bowed to Meng Hao. "Biggest bro, come, let me introduce you to one of my beloved partners. This is my true love, little Emerald." Meng Hao looked at the woman, smiled, and nodded. Considering that Fatty had called her his true love, Meng Hao took out a magical item and handed it over. Seeing this, Fatty's eyes suddenly gleamed, before Meng Hao knew what was happening. "Biggest bro, this is the love of my life, little Scarlet. Biggest bro, this is my heart and soul, little sweetie. Biggest bro, this is my..." One by one, Fatty brought out all 500 of his beloved partners to introduce to Meng Hao, even managing to recall the different pet names for all of them. Meng Hao looked at all the women, and Fatty's crafty smile and the exultant gleam in his eyes, and could do nothing but smile wryly as he gifted one magical item after another. When the last beloved partner had been introduced, Meng Hao assumed the entire affair was over. But next, Fatty called a young man over. "Why haven't you kowtowed to your uncle Meng Hao yet?" Fatty said, eyes wide with anger. Then he turned and smiled at Meng Hao. "This is my son." Meng Hao's eyes went wide. He looked at the young man and then back at Fatty. Chuckling wryly, he handed a magical item over as a gift. After that, Fatty introduced over 300 sons and daughters. And after that, "Biggest bro, this is my grandson." Meng Hao felt numb. He had to admire how Fatty could remember the nicknames of all 500 of his beloved partners and not make a single mistake. Neither did he forget the names of any of his sons or daughters, nor the more than 100 grandchildren. Most terrifying to Meng Hao was that he soon found out that Fatty actually had great-grandchildren too. Although the great-grandchildren were all toddlers or younger, Meng Hao couldn't hold back from giving them gifts too. After all, having given so many gifts already, he couldn't stop short now. He had originally planned to stay for several days, but by the second day, he quickly took his leave. He was worried that if he stayed any longer, the loot he had built up so carefully in his bag of holding would eventually all be divided up by Fatty's family. "Since I can't take over the Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum, my goal is to have my descendants do it for me," Fatty said as he saw Meng Hao off. His eyes glittered with a strange light as he gave voice to his grand aspirations. Meng Hao couldn't help but admire such notions. He had the feeling that Fatty would definitely be able to pull something like that off. Eyes glittering encouragingly, he patted Fatty on the shoulder. "Work hard, bro," he said. "I think 500 beloved partners is actually only a good starting point. You should really have at least 5,000. That way, you would have a great big clan. Think about it, you would have thousands of sons and daughters, and then when they had children, the final number would be astounding." It might be somewhat irresponsible, but Meng Hao egged Fatty on anyway. In response, Fatty's eyes lit up, and he started laughing heartily. "No wonder you're the biggest bro. That's a great idea. I was thinking the same thing. I'm going to start a clan." Seeing the wild ambition flickering in Fatty's eyes caused Meng Hao to cough dryly and then turn to leave. There was no bitterness to this parting, only smiles. Meng Hao didn't mention anything about when he would return again, nor did Fatty ask. Both avoided the topic. When it came time to actually part ways, Fatty's smile faded away, and he clasped Meng Hao by the shoulders. "Meng Hao, we're brothers forever and ever." "Forever," Meng Hao replied with a decisive nod. They looked at each other for another moment, then started laughing again. Finally, they turned and parted, one headed back to his sect, the other off into the distance. Chapter 1203, Old Friends. After leaving the Paleo-Immortal Mausoleum, Meng Hao flew through the starry sky, thinking about the old days in the Reliance sect. After a while, he turned and headed toward another asteroid and another teleportation portal. This time, his destination was the Sublime Flow Sword Grotto. He was not going there to collect money either, but to see an old friend. His elder brother Chen Fan had joined the Sublime Flow Sword Grotto years ago. Meng Hao was not unfamiliar with the Sublime Flow Sword Grotto. Although he had never been there since he was the joint disciple of the three great Taoist societies, then technically speaking, the Sublime Flow Sword Grotto was also his sect. As soon as he arrived, the sound of tolling bells rang out through the sect. The Tao Realm patriarchs came out to see him, and Meng Hao was taken to offer respects to the sect leader and the patriarchs and explain the purpose of his visit. When he finally saw Chen Fan, he looked different than before. Last time he had seemed middle-aged, but now he looked old, with grayish-white hair and a placid expression. His cultivation base was in the immortal realm. Although he wasn't very well known among the disciples of the Sublime Flow Sword Grotto, the elder generation felt that he had unlimited potential. Chen Fan sat in meditation. Wherever he went, he took a huge boulder with him, within which could be seen the faint image of a woman. One of the Tao Realm patriarchs of the Sublime Flow Sword Grotto stood next to Meng Hao, explaining. "He converges his love and transforms the love into a sword that can pierce the heavens. The sword of your elder brother here is not merciless and does not sever love. His memories of the past have filled his heart to the point where they have become his sword. His love allows him to cultivate the Tao of the heart sword. His latent talent is well suited to such a Tao. If he can step into the ancient realm within the next 100 years, then he will definitely be another chosen of the Sublime Flow Sword Grotto." The praise in his eyes as he looked at Chen Fan was impossible to conceal. Chen Fan's eyes slowly opened as he looked first at the sword laid across his knees, then up at Meng Hao. A smile appeared on his face. It was the same smile Meng Hao remembered from the Reliance sect and the Solitary Sword sect. It was a warm, caring smile, although now it seemed much more ancient. "Little junior brother," he said. As soon as those 3 words left his mouth, Meng Hao's heart surged with emotion as he remembered all the things that had happened in the past. "Elder brother," Meng Hao said softly. As he walked over toward Chen Fan, the Dao Realm patriarch smiled slightly, then turned and left, leaving Meng Hao in Chen Fan's care. Meng Hao first clasped hands and bowed in greeting to the boulder. He knew that the woman in that boulder was his eldest brother's true love, and that she had eventually come to be Chen Fan's entire life. "In my life I will only love one person. I fell in love with you when you were alive, and after you died that feeling became a memory. If you live, I will spend my whole life with you. If you die, then I will accompany the memory of you for my whole life." That was Chen Fan. His naivety and obsession were why the solitary sword sect chose to take him from the Reliance sect in the first place. Back then, he didn't hesitate at all to make his decision. If the sect was going to be destroyed, then he would choose to die along with it. He was naive and obsessed. That was Chen Fan. Chen Fan's expression was the same as ever as he watched Meng Hao offer formal greetings to the boulder. Since Meng Hao was his little junior brother, then Meng Hao was also junior brother to his wife as well. Years ago he had constantly worried about this junior brother of his, but then he had watched him flourish, one step at a time, and that made him very happy. He had always hoped that Meng Hao would continue to improve, and that one day he would reach the true pinnacle. "On the path of cultivation," Chen Fan said softly, "it doesn't matter if you talk about your own heart or the Tao. The most important thing is to be steadfast." Meng Hao nodded, then sat down cross-legged in front of Chen Fan. It felt just like it had back in the year they had met. Now, Meng Hao possessed a cultivation base that stood on equal footing with the Tao realm. However, in the presence of his elder brother, he was still the same little junior brother he had always been. That was how it would be for their entire lives. He told Chen Fan about his plan to leave the 9th mountain and sea, to find Su Qing and bring her back. "I'm aware of the purpose of your visit," Chen Fan said quietly. "We are cultivators and our lifespans are long. Heaven and earth are large, and it's a good thing to visit new places and travel new paths. There is no need to worry about us here in the 9th mountain and sea. We all have our own different paths. You have to trust Li Fugui and myself just as we trust you. All of our dreams will come true eventually." He looked over at the rock and the faint image of the woman inside. "Elder brother, if it ever becomes possible for me to do so, I will definitely help you resurrect sister-in-law Shan Ling," Meng Hao said softly. It was his first time he had ever said such a thing. Although he had been able to keep his promise to Han Shan, considering the level of his cultivation base, there was no way for him to resurrect someone who had been dead for so long. "You're thinking too hard on it," Chen Fan said, chuckling. His eyes shone with a soft light. "To me, she's always here." Meng Hao stared at Chen Fan in shock. "When your Tao is the heart, then if you have something in your heart, it exists. If you don't have it in your heart, it doesn't exist." Chen Fan waved his right hand, and something like a domain appeared. It wasn't very large, only about 9 meters wide. However, now that that 9-meter domain existed, Meng Hao could see that the woman in the boulder was opening her eyes. Her life force seemed to be restored, and suddenly, she walked out from within the boulder and sat down next to Chen Fan. She looked at Meng Hao, smiling as she leaned up against Chen Fan's shoulder. "This," Meng Hao said, taking a deep breath. This Taoist magic first gave him the sensation that he was looking at an illusion. However, as he examined the woman closely, she actually didn't seem like an illusion at all. Chen Fan looked deeply into Meng Hao's eyes and said, "She might seem artificial to you, but to me, she is very real. Sometimes the difference between what is artificial and what is real depends on different perspectives and different hearts." Meng Hao's heart trembled as if he had just gained some sort of enlightenment. He closed his eyes and began to meditate. 3 days later, he opened his eyes again. Rising to his feet, he clasped hands and bowed to Chen Fan. "Many thanks for your advice, eldest brother," he said. Although his cultivation base far exceeded that of Chen Fan's circumstances made him serendipitously proficient with the Tao of the real and the artificial. That was the reason that he cultivated the heart sword, and was one of the reasons why the Sublime Flow Sword Grotto viewed him with such importance. "Go, bring junior sister Su Qing back. I haven't seen her in a long time and I miss her." Chen Fan's eyes glowed with encouragement. Meng Hao took a deep breath, nodded, and took his leave. His next destination was the Moonset Lake, one of the 5 great holy lands. In many ways, the place was not as beautiful as the name would have it sound. Meng Hao had never dealt much with the sect, but he was aware that the techniques of the Moonset Lake were similar to the Tao of the devils. When the moon hangs high in the sky, it might be nighttime, but there is still light. However, after the moon sets, when the sun has not yet risen, there is no darker time of night. That was the meaning of the name Moonset Lake. Wang Yaokai fit in well. He was fundamentally a ruthless person. He treated others ruthlessly, and he treated himself even more so, in order to further his cultivation and create his own technique, to see further than he had ever been able to see. He had dug out his own eyes. The ruthlessness of that act had caught the attention of the elders of Moonset Lake, and was what prompted them to take him in and help him grow and develop. Although most people assumed he lived in a world of complete darkness, there was something that nobody knew. Wang Yaokai could actually see things very vividly. The divine ability he created remained eternally fixed inside his mind. From then on, he could actually see everything, even though he had no eyes. After arriving at Moonset Lake, his ferocity and ruthlessness were even more evident. After going through some fierce battles, both with members of his sect and with others, he had earned the nickname Devil-Eyed Killer. The word devil was a term of respect. The word eye was a reference to the two empty eye sockets on his face, and the word killer represented how he slaughtered his enemies. When Meng Hao came and said that he wished to visit Wang Yaokai, the disciple assigned to receive visitors looked at him with a flickering expression. Apparently, in Moonset Lake, Wang Yaokai's name was even more awe-inspiring than Meng Hao's. And that was despite the fact that Wang Yaokai was still only an immortal. When he was taken to Wang Yaokai, he found him sitting cross-legged next to a black pond. Vicious-looking faces floated in and out of the water, swirling around Wang Yaokai as they consumed parts of his flesh. "Long time no see, Meng Hao," he said in a grating voice. He lifted his head up, staring at Meng Hao with his two vacant eye sockets. Meng Hao looked at him and sighed. After a moment of silence, Wang Yaokai slowly said, "There's no reason to sigh. Everything comes with a price." The faces around him continued to tear at his flesh, and yet he didn't even frown. Apparently, he was used to this. "These are all the people I've killed, whose souls I extracted. I allow them to chew on me day and night. It is only in this way that I can feel their hatred and thus see the colorful world around me." Meng Hao looked at Wang Yaokai and sighed inwardly. The 4 young men who had been taken from Mount Daching all those years ago included himself, Fatty, Wang Yaokai, and Dong Hu. Fatty had the most carefree life, and Wang Yaokai was the most vicious. As for Dong Hu, although had been missing for many years, Meng Hao had the feeling that he was somewhere out there, shaking things up violently. Meng Hao meditated with Wang Yaokai for an entire night. The following day, he stood and turned to go when Wang Yaokai suddenly said, "Meng Hao, we're friends, right?" Meng Hao looked back at him and replied, "We were friends in the past, we're friends now, and we'll be friends in the future." Wang Yaokai laughed. It was grating but not ear-piercing. This was the same bumbling young man from back on Mount Daching, who thought that because he was the oldest, he had to take care of his friends. "Meng Hao, you must become as strong as you can, and quickly. The moon has set and the sun has not risen. The dark of night has come, and it's impossible to say how long it will last. I have seen and I can feel that soon, great chaos will strike." Meng Hao shivered. Although he knew exactly what was being referred to, he had never imagined that Wang Yaokai would too. He gazed at him deeply for a long moment, then left. Slowly he faded away into the distance, leaving Moonset Lake behind. /expand. Next he went to the ancient demon immortal sect. Before leaving the 9th mountain and sea, he wanted to see Kijiusi. However, although he could find the location of the ancient demon immortal sect, he was unable to enter. There was an invisible barrier in place that he could not pass without trying to break it open. He hovered quietly outside of the ruins for a while before finally clasping hands and bowing deeply. Then he turned and left. On a mountain peak inside the rubble of the sect, Kijiusi stood there looking at Meng Hao leave. Suddenly Knight's voice spoke out next to him. "Why didn't you let him in? He has Jai Tian's karma on him, and I have even more than he does. If the two of us met now, it would be harmful for him." Kijiusi sighed, then turned his head to look out at the ruins stretching out beneath him. "Jai Tian," he murmured, cold, killing intent gleaming in his eyes. Meng Hao didn't get a chance to meet Kijiusi again. He left and headed toward the ruins of immortality. He needed to get the incomplete Paragon Bridge that he had copied to make his Paragon magic. Back then, he had been unable to take away the bridge itself. But now his own Paragon Bridge had already transformed. Thanks to the bridge of immortal treading, it was no longer illusory but corporeal. With his current cultivation base, he would be able to use his paragon magic and merge it with the true broken paragon bridge. A prismatic streak shot into the ruins of immortality as Meng Hao followed the same course as last time. He saw many of the same things he had seen before. He saw broken-down temples and huge disembodied heads. He saw numerous corpses, shattered lands, destroyed magical items, and the ruins of palaces, all floating out in the void. After a long time, he reached the area where he had created his Taoist magic, and then found the location where he had gained enlightenment of his paragon magic, the Shattered Bridge. It was only a section of that bridge, but even from a distance and despite the fact that it had fallen into ruins, Meng Hao could sense the might of a paragon emanating off of it, the incredible power of heaven and earth. This bridge had once spanned the highest heavens, and had been the object of worship by countless life forms, all of whom deeply desired to walk upon it. But now it was broken. Perhaps most of the bridge had faded away into the sands of time, and only this small section was what remained. After all the years that had passed, it remained in this one spot. No one had ever been able to take it away. Not even Jai Tian could take it, much less other Tao realm cultivators. However, years ago, Meng Hao had forged his own paragon magic by means of this bridge and thus had allowed it to become whole once again. It was that very Taoist magic that had earned him a spot in the echelon. Today, he had returned to take the bridge away. "Are you really the Paramita Bridge?" he asked softly. "Well, I'm not completely certain what your previous name was, but I do know that a lot of people know you." He couldn't help but think of the black-robed man who had emerged from the Paragon painting in the windswept realm, and the expression on his face when he saw the Paragon Bridge. Perhaps in the so-called Paramita, even Paragons need to walk across you, to truly become Paragons. 1. The characters for Paramita can also be read the other shore, which might be relevant since we're talking about a bridge here. Also, the other shore aspect plays into the meaning of the Buddhist concept of Paramita. But today I'm going to take you away. From now on you belong to Meng Hao, you are my Paragon Bridge. Meng Hao's eyes shone with a bright light as he began to walk forward toward the bridge. The pressure of a paragon rumbled out and Meng Hao began to shine with scintillating light. He waved his right hand and suddenly his Paragon Bridge appeared. "Merge," he roared, performing a double-handed incantation gesture, and then waving his finger toward his Paragon Bridge. Instantly, the two bridges began to merge together. The roar of the bridge soul could be heard from the Paragon Bridge as it ensured that nothing unexpected happened during the merger. As the process continued, the pressure radiating off of the Paragon Bridge grew stronger. Rumbling filled the air, and everything grew dim. A wind swept through the ruins of immortality, as if the Paragon Bridge were truly awakening. The pressure intensified, and the heavens trembled. The ruins of immortality quaked, and soon the entire mountain and sea realm was imperceptibly shaking. No power of expulsion could be felt from the mountains and seas, and yet it seemed like a pair of invisible eyes had turned their gaze towards it, as if recalling memories of the past. That wasn't all. Above the mountain and sea realm in the 33 heavens, everything was shaking. Countless cultivators there were shocked, although they had no idea what exactly was happening. In addition, outside the 33 heavens, far out in the great expanse, was a world in which several suns were hauling a huge statue. All of the cultivators there were also astonished. Shockingly, it was also possible to see that in the land of the statue, which was growing inexorably closer to the mountain and sea realm, there was also a bridge hovering in midair. It was also a Paragon Bridge, but it was in ruins, as if it were in place only as a symbol and had lost all of its previous significance. That bridge also began to tremble. The voice of woman spoke out, gloomy and serious. "Someone is awakening it." Beneath the 33 heavens, back in the mountain and sea realm, in the ruins of immortality in the 9th mountain and sea, Meng Hao threw his head back and roared. He suddenly flew up to stand atop the Paragon Bridge, where he first lifted his hands up into the air and then slammed them down onto the surface of the bridge. Merge. Rumble. Meng Hao's Paragon Bridge began to descend as the merging quickened. The aura of a paragon rose up into the air, inundating Meng Hao. Even though this was his own paragon magic, he was still affected and coughed up a mouthful of blood. However, his eyes gleamed with focus. This time, he was going to take away the ruins of the Paragon Bridge no matter what. He was going to merge them with his own Paragon Bridge to make it stronger. Merge. Meng Hao glowed with azure light as the bridge soul of his Paragon Bridge went all out. risking its own life as it controlled the bridge, causing it to descend further in its merging into the original bridge. This time there was a force of expulsion, which turned into a powerful backlash attack. Blood sprayed out of Meng Hao's mouth, and his Paragon Bridge appeared to be on the verge of collapsing. Apparently, the majesty of the broken bridge would not permit anyone to take control or ownership of it. "Meat jelly, parrot, get out here," Meng Hao roared. Meng Hao wiped the blood off his lips as the meat jelly and parrot flew out of his bag of holding. As soon as they appeared, their eyes went wide. Why you? What are you doing?" the meat jelly said, trembling. The shattered bridge filled it with a sensation of complete terror. That bridge had once been powerful enough to affect heaven and earth, to shake the world. Even though that power was now broken, its aura was still there. "It's THAT bridge," the parrot squawked excitedly. "Suppress it, fudge. Lord Fifth will definitely help you suppress it." It transformed into a multicolored streak of light that shot toward the broken Paragon Bridge. Meng Hao's Paragon Bridge then increased its own pressure and began to descend once more. The meat jelly gritted its teeth and spread out as it transformed into a flying rope. Apparently, the moronic meat jelly had decided to try to tie the broken Paragon Bridge and Meng Hao's Paragon Bridge together. Rumbling filled the air as the Paragon Bridges continued to merge together. Meng Hao's cultivation base was in full rotation, exploding with the full might of an all-heaven Tao immortal. By now, the forced merger had reached the point where the broken bridge and Meng Hao's Paragon Bridge were now almost completely superimposed. However, it was at this point that the power of a backlash attack, as well as the aura of expulsion, both exploded out. Performing an incantation gesture, Meng Hao unleashed his demon-sealing hexing magic. "You're already broken," he shouted. "You might have been supreme and almighty in the past, but now you're rubble. You're incomplete, not even half of what you used to be. With the will of my Paragon magic and the form of the bridge of immortal treading, I won't believe that I can't absorb you." His eyes were shot with blood, and blood sprayed out of his mouth. Gritting his teeth, he produced his fourth nirvana fruit and pressed it into his forehead. "Mastiff," he roared, and the mastiff flew out to form a cape. "Parrot," the parrot and the copper mirror instantly formed together into the battle weapon. This time, it was not a long blade but rather a glove. As the glove settled on Meng Hao's hand, he took 7 steps forward, building up massive energy and then unleashing a powerful punch. It was the god-slaying fist, Meng Hao's most powerful fist strike, capable of shaking even cultivators of the Tao realm. His Paragon Bridge was already beyond qualified to absorb the ruins of the bridge. With the power of the fist strike pouring into it, that last final distance between the two was closed. The two bridges were completely superimposed. At some point, a woman dressed in white had appeared up above. It was Paragon Sea Dream, who watched Meng Hao merge the two bridges, a complex expression on her face. In the moment that the two bridges superimposed, the broken bridge trembled, and then cracking sounds could be heard as it collapsed of its own accord. It was just like the world tree, which destroyed itself rather than look up and see a sky controlled by the Jai clan. The bridge was aware that it was simply too weak to do anything to prevent itself from being absorbed. If it were anyone else, the bridge would be able to fight back, even if it were weaker than it was right now. However, Meng Hao was different. He had the will of the Paragon Bridge and the form of the bridge of immortal treading. He had a bridge soul. Essentially, Meng Hao's Paragon Bridge was the true supreme Paragon Bridge. Although it was not as paramount as the broken bridge had been, it was more complete. Since that was the case, there was no way for it to prevent the merging, so the broken bridge chose to use the last bit of its aura to destroy itself. It would rather explode than be absorbed. Meng Hao's face flickered as he looked at the broken bridge crumbling and turning into ash. Then his eyes shone with a shocking, icy gleam. "You would rather destroy yourself than be absorbed, huh? Well then, go ahead and blow yourself up. Your death will allow my Paragon Bridge to take your place, to be born anew." Roaring, Meng Hao pushed both hands down onto the Paragon Bridge, which instantly began to shine with brilliant light. Instead of attempting to merge with the broken bridge, the Paragon Bridge would consume it. It would consume the ancient broken bridge to give itself new life. In the future, there would be no broken bridge. There would only be Meng Hao's Paragon Bridge. Rumbling could be heard as the Paragon Bridge voraciously consumed the flying ash that was the remnants of the broken bridge. As it did, its aura rose dramatically, shaking heaven and earth. The Paragon Bridge truly did have new life. It was now no longer illusory in any sense of the word. It was completely corporeal. When it became real, the 33 heavens trembled and all the bridges there collapsed. The incomplete bridge in the world of the statue, out in the vast expanse, also trembled and collapsed. For all eternity, it would never again exist. Back in the ruins of immortality, Paragon Sea Dream's soft voice echoed out. It used to have a name, she said. It was called the Heaven Tra. As of now, Meng Hao interrupted, it's called the Paragon Bridge. His words were not a show of disrespect. Rather, he didn't want to hear the former name. What he cared about was the current bridge, not what it had been in the past. Turning, Meng Hao waved his hand, causing the Paragon Bridge to emit a rumbling drone. The ruins of immortality shook as the bridge faded away. Meng Hao clasped hands and bowed to Paragon Sea Dream, then turned and left. Paragon Sea Dream hovered there, watching Meng Hao make his way off. Her eyes flickered with an absent-minded gleam. Back in the day, Big Brother Nine Seals was just as imposing. Chapter 1204. As of now, it's called the Paragon Bridge. Note from Deathblade. The following is a little anecdote from Jin, translated by Puffs. Keep in mind that in China, virtually all cell phones are basically prepaid, although many allow you to overdraw your account. Note from Jin. Let me tell you an embarrassing story. This afternoon I made a phone call to my old lady. There was a notification that the phone card was overdrawn, so I paid 10 yuan, about US $1.60 at the time, for her. Then I called a friend, and there was another notification about an overdrawn card, so I paid 10 yuan again. I ended up making 4 calls, and every time the cards were overdrawn, so I got mad. I ended up paying 10 yuan every time. Finally, I made yet another call, but outrageously enough they were overdrawn yet again. I got super mad and called customer service and let them have it. After a round of complaining, the customer service agent told me gently, "Sir, they actually didn't owe any money on their accounts. It's your card that's overdrawn." Expand. Meng Hao had finished collecting debts from the 5 great holy lands, the 3 churches, and 6 sects. He had visited his old friends and completed his Paragon Bridge. Now, the only debts left were among the 3 great clans. Of course, as far as the Li clan was concerned, Meng Hao felt a bit embarrassed to go there. That left only the Song and Wang clans. Song Luoden and Wang Mu. Once I collect your debts, then I'll leave the 9th mountain and see. He flew out of the ruins of immortality, eyes flickering as he headed toward an asteroid teleportation portal. Actually, deep in his heart, there was still one other place he wanted to visit, right before he left. Planet North Reed was far larger than Planet South Heaven. It was even larger than Planet East Victory. From a distance, it looked like an enormous blue sphere. Shockingly, it was orbited by 3 other smaller planetoids. Those 3 planetoids housed the 3 great clans, and even Planet North Reed itself was divided amongst those clans. All of the sects and schools here were auxiliary branches of those very clans. Currently, Meng Hao was walking out of a flickering teleportation portal on one of Planet North Reed's 3 planetoids, the one that belonged to the Song clan. As soon as he appeared, he found himself facing several hundred disciples of the Song clan. Apparently, they had been waiting for him. Almost as soon as he appeared, one of the Song clan disciples stepped forward with a bag of holding. "Our clan prince said that all of the extortion money he owes you is here," the Song clan cultivator said angrily. Then he threw the bag toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao blinked in response to the way the Song clan was handling the matter. He was aware that word had spread throughout the 9th mountain, and see about him going around collecting debt. It was something that clearly would not endear him to others, so the Song clan handed over the balance of the debt immediately in order to shoo him away. But Meng Hao didn't care, so long as he got his money. After scanning the bag of holding with divine sense to confirm the amount inside was correct, he turned to leave. His destination was not the teleportation portal, but rather the starry sky, and beyond that the Wang clan. Currently, the teleportation portal behind him was flashing continuously as one cultivator after another showed up to watch the scene of Meng Hao collecting debt. However, what was happening now was actually fairly boring. They had hoped to see Meng Hao collecting his debts through force, not just this lukewarm scene of him accepting the money without ado. Meanwhile, Song Luoden sat on a mountain peak some distance away, watching the events unfold via a secret magic. When he saw that everything was ending, he let out a sigh of relief. Although he felt truly wronged in the whole matter, there was nothing he could do about it. If he could settle his debt with the miserly Meng Hao and make him leave, that was all the better. However, just as Meng Hao was about to leave, the Song clan cultivator who had given him the bag of holding, apparently disgusted with what was happening, sarcastically said, "Our clan prince said that the heavens see everything we do. If you go around extorting people like this, you'll get your comeuppance sooner or later." The other Song clan cultivators gaped in shock. Off in the distance, Song Luoden's jaw dropped, and he shot to his feet, rage building up in his face. He was willing to swear an oath that he had never said such words. He was familiar with Meng Hao's personality, and he knew that uttering words like that would turn the situation into a disaster. "Damn it," he thought, instantly flying off of the top of the mountain. He couldn't just sit around and watch what was happening. He had to go give Meng Hao an explanation. In order to raise the money he needed to pay back Meng Hao, he had borrowed from virtually every willing party in the sect. In fact, he had even taken out a loan from the sect itself. If all of that was destroyed because of a single sentence, he would be reduced to tears. Just before Meng Hao left, right before he flew up into the air, he heard the words being spoken and then looked back at the Song clan cultivator. He also noticed the surrounding rogue cultivators who had come to watch the show, who were all looking on excitedly. There were even some who seemed to want to thank the Song clan cultivator for speaking up. "Well, now isn't this interesting?" Meng Hao said, smiling. The other members of the Song clan were trembling, and when they saw him smiling they edged backward, beads of sweat popping out on their foreheads. "Based on what I know about Song Luoden, he isn't that stupid. He would either grit his teeth and hand over the money or grit his teeth and refuse. Whatever his choice, he wouldn't say something like that. It seems Song Luoden's position within the Song clan has become a bit unstable. Well, that doesn't matter. Since he and I are friends, I might be able to help him out a bit." His smile grew more radiant and even a bit bashful and embarrassed. His smile and his word caused the faces of the surrounding Song clan cultivators to flicker. "That's what the prince told me to. Song Luoden, get out here," Meng Hao said suddenly, his voice rumbling like thunder, echoing throughout the entire planetoid. Almost as soon as the words left his mouth, Song Luoden appeared, flashing in his direction as fast as lightning. As soon as he arrived, he waved his sleeve, causing a wild wind to spring up and wrap around the clan member who had spoken moments ago. The man was immediately sent flying off into the distance, blood spraying out of his mouth, clearly seriously injured. "Fudge," he roared. "How dare you try to frame me? Men, arrest him." The surrounding Song clan cultivators immediately flew out and grabbed a hold of the man. Not even taking the time to ask the man who had given the orders for him to speak, Song Luoden spun and looked at Meng Hao, face grim and heart filled with bitterness. He suddenly regretted his earlier decision to try to save face by not meeting Meng Hao in person. If he had, then what had occurred moments ago would never have happened. Meng Hao looked at Song Luoden with an enigmatic smile, waiting for him to speak. "I never said that," Song Luoden grated stiffly. "I know," Meng Hao said with a smile. "Actually, since we're acquainted, why don't I help you out with this situation? I'll do it for a great price." Song Luoden was about to refuse, but then his eyes glittered. "How much do you want?" "Double what was in the bag of holding you just gave me." "You're ruthless? Fine. His name is Song Luoshan, chosen of the direct bloodline of the Song clan. He's trying to steal the position of Dao Child from me. Don't kill him, just ruin his reputation." Meng Hao chuckled and then suddenly called out in a voice like thunder, "Song Luoshan, you owe me money, time to pay me back." His voice seemed to contain heavenly might as it echoed out through the planetoid, causing countless mountains to tremble. A coldly spoken response drifted in from off in the distance. "Fellow Taoist Meng, I don't remember owing you anything. The person who owes you money is Song Luoden. If I say you owe me, then you owe me." Even as he spoke, Meng Hao took a step forward. His body flickered and he reappeared off in the distance, where he launched a punch into the ground. Immediately the land collapsed and a figure flew out. It was a young man, handsome, but with narrow eyes. Originally, those eyes had been glittering with venomous coldness, but now they were bright with alarm at the sight of Meng Hao's display of domineering might. "Fellow Taoist Meng, what are you trying to do?" the young man roared. He urgently backed up, and at the same time dozens of beams of light began to fly out from within the Song clan. Those would be the powerful experts in charge of guarding the area. By now, all of the various sects and clans had gotten the news about the way Meng Hao went about collecting debt. The Song clan didn't want to be any further entangled with him. They simply wanted to get him to leave as quickly as possible. However, these people had been ordered to stand guard in the area just in case something unexpected happened. Now that they saw Meng Hao making a move, they showed their faces. "Meng Hao, you've been paid what you were owed. What are you trying to do?" Roaring shouts could be heard as the dozens of beams of light closed in to protect the young man from being attacked by Meng Hao. "Song Luoden already paid me," he replied coolly, but this Song Luoshan hasn't. He waved his right hand, causing a wild wind to spring up and envelop the group. Even as their minds were shaken, Meng Hao strode forward toward Song Luoshan. "I don't owe you money," Song Luoshan cried. He was already filled with regret at trying to use Meng Hao to weaken Song Luoden. However, regret was now useless. As he shot backward, he crushed a Jade slip, requesting assistance from the clan elders. "You don't deserve to owe me money, and yet you try to incite a conflict between me and Song Luoden. What a flimsy plan. I really don't understand how someone with an intellect like yours could possibly cause Song Luoden to feel threatened." Shaking his head, Meng Hao waved his hand toward Song Luoshan, then made a grasping motion, which caused Song Luoshan to fly toward him, trembling. "Patriarch, save me," Song Luoshan screamed. Meng Hao suddenly clenched his left hand into a fist and then punched out into the air next to him with the god-slaying fist. That punch caused the air to collapse. A muffled grunt could be heard as an emaciated, grim-faced old man appeared. He had been attempting to save Song Luoshan, but hadn't been fast enough. He could now do nothing but watch as Meng Hao grabbed onto Song Luoshan. "Meng Hao," he said in a dark tone, "don't push things too far. The Song clan doesn't want to make you an enemy, but you can't be so excessive." This man was emanating the aura of the Dao realm. He was obviously one of the Dao realm patriarchs of the Song clan. Even as he spoke, another Dao realm aura began to emanate out from the planetoid. Although no one appeared, the aura locked down onto Meng Hao. Further off on planet North Reed, another even more terrifying Dao realm aura seemed to focus its attention on what was happening. "The struggles over the position of Song clan Dao child have nothing to do with me. However, Song Luoshan clearly plotted against me, and for that, he shall pay the price." Meng Hao held Song Luoshan in hand and looked steadily at the emaciated old man, completely ignoring his Dao realm aura. The old man glared angrily at Song Luoshan. It was only now that he realized that Song Luoshan had actually taken the initiative to scheme against Meng Hao, and he cursed him for his foolishness. The entire Song clan had tacitly approved of the way Song Luoden had collected the money he needed to pay Meng Hao, and when those efforts had fallen short, the clan itself had been willing to loan him money. It was easy to see from this that, generally speaking, the Song clan had no desire whatsoever to provoke Meng Hao. But now, this idiot had gone and done exactly that. From the emaciated old man's perspective, Song Luoshan was simply incurably moronic. If it weren't for the fact that his bloodline was uniquely important to the safety of the clan, he would ignore the matter. "We will definitely compensate you for this matter," the old man said slowly. Meng Hao smiled and released Song Luoshan. He was just about to speak when, all of a sudden, a tremor ran through him, and he stared blankly over the old man's shoulder. The old man's eyes widened, and he turned around but didn't see anything. As he frowned, he could sense Meng Hao's eyes narrowing. Meng Hao began to pant. Moments ago, he had seen something very bizarre behind the old man. It was a man in a black robe, with long white hair, strolling along through the void. He had a shocking murderous aura. It was none other than the man who had walked out of the Paragon magic in the windswept realm, the Paragon. Slaughter. Chapter 1205. Slaughter appears again. /expand. Meng Hao could see the black-robed man, but no one else could. He seemed lonely, with the supreme air of a paragon, and yet he radiated a boundless murderous aura as he walked past the Song clan patriarch and headed out toward the starry sky. Panting anxiously, Meng Hao completely forgot about the matter of settling accounts. He instantly flashed through the air to follow the black-robed man. In the windswept realm, he had personally watched this man walk out into the void and then vanish. He would never have been able to imagine that he would actually see him again here. The emaciated old man frowned. He hadn't seen anything unusual at all. Meng Hao's bizarre reaction caused his eyes to narrow. "Fellow Taoist Meng," the old man said. Almost at the same time, Meng Hao cried out, "Senior, wait for me." He kept his eyes fixed on the black-robed man, who was strolling off into the distance at incredible speed. Almost as soon as the words left his mouth, the black-robed man paused and then slowly turned his head to glance casually at Meng Hao. That single glance caused Meng Hao's mind to tremble as if lightning were striking it. It didn't matter that he was an all-heaven Dao immortal. As of that moment, his entire consciousness felt as if it were sinking into boundless slaughter. He trembled violently, and blood sprayed out of his mouth. It felt as if some indescribable power were pounding through his mind, simultaneously, wiping away all his memories of the black-robed man. The rumbling wasn't just affecting Meng Hao. The emaciated old man also started trembling. That was because in the instant that the black-robed man had turned around, he was also able to see him. That single glance caused blood to spray out of the old man's mouth, and his essence aura to grow unstable. His expression was one of shock before it suddenly went blank. His memories of how he had been injured just now, as well as the sight of the black-robed man, were instantly wiped away. It wasn't just him, it was also the other Tao Realm patriarch on the planetoid. When the black-robed man turned and became visible, they had caught sight of him. However, his single glance sent their minds spinning, caused them to cough up blood, and made them feel like they were about to explode. It was as if a huge hand were forcibly wiping away everything about the man that existed in their minds. The same thing happened to the Song clan's most powerful patriarch, the one on planet North Reed itself, who had been watching Meng Hao the entire time. Meng Hao's bizarre behavior had startled him, and when the black-robed man turned around, it caused the Tao Realm patriarch to cough up several mouthfuls of blood. His memories were also wiped away, no matter what he did to fight back. It was like he was so weak that he couldn't stand up to a single blow. All of these things take some time to describe, but actually happened in a brief moment. The ordinary clan members' memories were not wiped away because they had never laid eyes on the black-robed man in the first place. However, they saw Meng Hao and the patriarchs coughing up blood, which, coupled with the miserable shrieks that echoed from their mouths, made the scene completely bizarre. All of the surrounding Song clan cultivators gasped. Meng Hao was the first to regain his senses. His eyes were completely bloodshot as the invisible hand threatened to wipe away his memories of the black-robed man. Apparently, this gaze embodied a paramount Taoist magic. The black-robed man did not wish memories of him to exist in anyone's minds. To ensure that no trace of him was remembered by anyone, he would wipe their minds clean. However, in the moment that Meng Hao's memories were about to be wiped away, he roared, and azure light suddenly exploded out of him. The power of an all-heaven Tao immortal surged out, and the drop of Paragon's blood inside of him seethed. His eyes shone with wild light, and he gritted his teeth as he produced his fourth nirvana fruit, then pushed it down into his forehead. My memories belong to me for all eternity. If I want them wiped out, that's my decision. Other people don't have the right or the qualifications to touch my memories. He continued to cough up blood as the nirvana fruit melted down into him. It caused the azure light to become even more radiant, and combined with the Paragon's blood, made Meng Hao just barely capable of resisting the enormous hand, which he shoved out of his mind. Rumble! He staggered backward, coughing up another mouthful of blood, but completely clear-headed. He lifted his head up to find the black-robed man looking at him with a surprised expression. The black-robed man stared at him for a moment, then nodded, as if he approved of Meng Hao's existence. Then he turned and began to walk off into the distance. Meng Hao took a deep breath, gritted his teeth, and flew after him. He could sense that this man harbored no malice. That gaze from earlier could shake heaven and earth, but in actuality, it was apparently some sort of test. Of those he tested, only those who managed to maintain their memories of him could qualify to follow him off into the distance. After a long moment, Meng Hao and the black-robed man were gone, and the emaciated old man from the Song clan regained his senses, as did the other two patriarchs. They quickly communicated with each other via divine sense, and came to the realization that none of them had any memories regarding what had just happened. They only remembered Meng Hao acting strangely. However, these were Tao Realm experts. The black-robed man might have taken action to wipe away their memories, but he didn't hide that fact. After the three of them considered what had happened, they quickly reached a conclusion. We saw some being that we should not have seen. That terrifying entity erased whatever it was that we saw. After questioning some of the surrounding disciples, the three Song clan Tao Realm patriarchs' hearts sank, and their fear of Meng Hao increased. From the various clues they had gathered, they came to the conclusion that whatever being it was that had erased their memories must also have some connection to Meng Hao. After all, Meng Hao had caught sight of the man before they had. Therefore, what was written between the lines was that Meng Hao knew that terrifying entity. Pass orders down that no members of the Song clan are to have anything to do with Meng Hao. He harbors too many terrifying secrets that we should not know anything about. Having made their decision, the three Song clan patriarchs officially sent their orders out. As for Song Luoshan, who had dared to provoke Meng Hao, the three patriarchs actually didn't rebuke him at all. However, the way they ignored him left him feeling very uneasy. Song Luodan had been watching from off in the distance. He looked thoughtfully in the direction Meng Hao had headed and realized that it was the planetoid controlled by the Wang clan. Out in the starry sky, the black-robed man didn't take very long strides, and yet every step was like a teleportation. Meng Hao drew on the full power of his cultivation base, and yet was quickly falling behind. Seeing that he couldn't catch up, he didn't allow himself to get nervous. Instead, he keyed in on the movement of the man's legs. As he watched, he was able to detect that there was a certain cadence to the way he walked. Meng Hao began to imitate it, lifting his feet up and placing them down in a certain way. Although he wasn't able to tell, the way he was imitating the man caused his own figure to pulse between being blurry and being clear. Every step he took caused the starry sky to seemingly shrink. When his foot landed, the starry sky would return to normal. Without even realizing it, he was actually matching his steps to the black-robed man's, even catching up. Every time the man lifted his foot up, so did Meng Hao. Every time he stepped down, so did Meng Hao. Time passed, although Meng Hao wasn't sure how much. On the one hand, it seemed like a moment, but on the other hand, it seemed endless. He was lost in the special cadence of walking, step after step. Suddenly, the black-robed man stopped walking, and Meng Hao shivered as he awakened from his reverie. He looked around to find that he was still in the vicinity of planet North Reed, although he had traveled from one of the smaller planetoids to another. Although the planetoids were some distance away from each other, they weren't that far. In fact, you could even reach from one to another with divine sense. Considering the level of Meng Hao's cultivation base, it would only take a few breaths of time to go from one to another. But for some reason, he felt as if a long time had just passed, which would seem to indicate that he had traveled for a very long distance. However, the situation seemed to be the exact opposite, which left Meng Hao feeling as if something strange was going on. By now, he was sure that the state he had been in just now and that special way of walking was definitely some strange Taoist magic, and an unusual one at that. However, the facts of the matter made Meng Hao feel as if he had overestimated the walking technique. He couldn't say that he was disappointed, but he did sigh inwardly. At this point, he turned to look back in the direction of the Song clan's planetoid, and suddenly he began to shake. His eyes went wide with disbelief and shock. His whole body shook. It was as if all of the amazing and shocking things he had experienced in his entire life put together weren't nearly as stunning as what he was seeing now. He had seen many astonishing things in his years, but as of this moment, what he was seeing was truly unbelievable. His mind felt as if it were being struck by a million lightning bolts. His jaw dropped, and he stared in the direction of the Song clan's planetoid as the flicker of teleportation could be seen, and a person emerged from the teleportation portal. He was handsome and had the air of a scholar. He even seemed to glow with azure light. He watched this scholar be handed a bag of holding by the Song clan cultivators, and then saw the young man cry out in a thunderous voice. Song Luoden, get out here. What he was seeing was almost like a vision of himself. He watched himself move forward and grab Song Luoden. He saw the emaciated man make his appearance, and then saw the black-robed man appear. He saw the test administered, then saw the black-robed man strolling out into the starry sky. Then, he saw himself following all the way, until the other black-robed man and the other Meng Hao superimposed with their real selves. Meng Hao was shaking, and great waves of shock roared through his head. That walking technique wasn't too slow, he murmured. It was too fast, so fast, that it can cause you to travel through time. I can't believe that I actually walked backward, for one incense stick's worth of time. The bizarreness of the Taoist magic caused his mind to rumble with sounds like thunder. After a long moment passed, Meng Hao turned to look at the black-robed man, who was now looking down toward an area down below, situated between a mountain and a river. Meng Hao's heart was gripped with shock as he also looked down at the foot of that mountain, where there was a bamboo forest. Inside the bamboo forest was a vulgar-looking old man, sitting there cross-legged. Directly in front of the old man was a young man, who happened to be none other than Wang Mu. Chapter 1206, Taoist Magic of Time. Chapter 1207, Grievous News. Meng Hao's eyes flickered as he looked at the black-robed man, within whose eyes had suddenly appeared gentleness. That gentleness was not directed toward Wang Mu, but rather to the old man sitting in front of him. 1. We've seen this old man in the Wang clan on 2 different occasions. The first time was when Wang Mu was introduced in Chapter 806. He also had a cameo in Chapter 964, when Wang Tengfei awakened his bloodline. That old man was a stranger to Meng Hao. He had never seen him before. However, the moment he laid eyes on him, Meng Hao got the feeling that there was something terrifyingly powerful about him. Time passed. The black-robed man and Meng Hao both hovered there looking down. After a while, the black-robed man suddenly took a step forward. Meng Hao imitated him subconsciously, and when his foot landed, the world seemed to momentarily become magnified, and his vision blurred momentarily. When it became clear, both the black-robed man and Meng Hao were now standing in the bamboo forest next to the old man and Wang Mu. Meng Hao took a deep breath, but apparently Wang Mu hadn't the slightest idea any of this was happening. "All right," the old man said coolly, "this session of cultivation is done. Come back tomorrow." He waved his right hand and Wang Mu staggered backward. He looked up with an unyielding gleam in his eyes. "I want to defeat Wang Tengfei." "Then you need to work harder at cultivation," the old man replied, his voice echoing out. Wang Mu once again staggered backwards uncontrollably, then vanished. After Wang Mu disappeared, complete silence fell over the bamboo forest. For some reason, the ambience of the area felt somewhat eerie to Meng Hao. Furthermore, within the silence, a slight droning sound began to rise. Soon, Meng Hao realized that flying towards them from within the bamboo forest was a cloud of mosquitoes. They didn't seem any larger than ordinary mosquitoes, but for some reason, when Meng Hao looked at them, his heart trembled and a sense of grave crisis exploded up within him. These were definitely not ordinary mosquitoes, of that Meng Hao was certain. The kind of aura that was emanating from them was something he had never sensed on any beast before. It was an aura filled with murderous intent and a towering brutality. Most importantly, there was a sensation of profound ancientness. Based on the level of Meng Hao's current cultivation base, he gradually reached a conclusion that caused his heart to tremble. These mosquitoes are more ancient than the mountain and sea realm itself. He began to pant as he stared at the mosquitoes, especially one in particular that was completely gold and flying in the lead. Boundless ripples spread out from it as it flew directly toward Meng Hao and the black-robed man. It then began to circulate around the black-robed man, buzzing with what seemed to be both joy and grief. From the way it flew around him, it seemed to want to get closer to him, and yet was separated from him, as if by some invisible barrier that it could not cross. 2. In Renegade Immortal, Wang Lin had a pet mosquito. Maybe you could even say that it was the mastiff of that story. Meng Hao suddenly realized that the black-robed man seemed to have the same expression of both joy and grief. It was at this point that a sigh could be heard coming from the skinny old man. Although he normally looked vulgar right now, he seemed filled with complicated, melancholy emotions. He suddenly turned and looked directly at Meng Hao. Meng Hao's mind trembled. It was as if that gaze were a sharp sword that was currently stabbing into his mind, attempting to shred his divine sense into nothing. Azure light suddenly sprang up, and the power of an all-heaven Tao immortal exploded out. Not only did it shield his mind, it also transformed a portion of his cultivation base into a sword-like gaze which stabbed back into the eyes of the old man. The old man said, eyes flickering. Moments later, everything returned to normal. The old man looked thoughtfully at Meng Hao for a moment before turning his complicated gaze toward the black-robed man. Obviously, he was completely aware that both Meng Hao and the black-robed man were standing there. "You," the old man said softly. Apparently, that was all he could say before he was at a loss for words, as the complex feelings within him grew stronger. After a moment of silence, the black-robed man suddenly spoke, his voice hoarse, cold, and ancient. "Where is he?" Although the 3 words he spoke were completely ordinary in nature, when spoken by him, they were filled with a shocking murderous aura, as if this man were fundamentally formed from a murderous aura. Meng Hao took a deep breath. Although he had no idea who this black-robed man was, if he didn't understand what was going on between him and the old man, then he had no right to have practiced cultivation to his current level. They know each other. "We're in the Wang clan, and this old man is one of Wang Mu's teachers. He also knows Wang Tengfei. That means that it's very likely that he is also a member of the Wang clan. This black-robed paragon is very mysterious and clearly cannot be a cultivator from the modern era. He's existed for ages and certainly comes from before the time when the mountain and sea realm existed. That much is obvious because of what happened with those ancient mosquitoes. In that case, since they know each other, this old man." Having reached this point in his train of thought, Meng Hao's pupils constricted. In his past dealings with the Wang clan, he had always felt their magical techniques to be bizarre. Furthermore, there was something very mysterious and extraordinary about their bloodline. Even as Meng Hao's mind spun, The skinny old man thought for a moment, and then spoke in a hoarse voice that seemed to be filled with reminiscence. Back then he left and never came back. The black-robed man closed his eyes for a moment. Finally, he opened them and asked, "What about her?" "They left together. She never came back either." The old man sighed. Within the complicated gaze he leveled at the black-robed man was hidden astonishment and disbelief. Unable to hold back, he finally asked the question that burned in his mind. "You, back then, didn't you dissipate?" The black-robed man shook his head. Declining to say anything else, he turned to leave. "Wang." The old man only spoke one word before stopping, as if he wasn't sure exactly how to address the man. However, that single word caused Meng Hao's mind to tremble. He looked at the old man, then at the black-robed man. The character Wang Chinese letter had two meanings, of course. One carried the meaning of a king. The other caused Meng Hao to gasp. He's a member of the Wang clan patriarch. Meng Hao felt his thoughts going wild. If he's a Wang clan patriarch, then that means the Wang clan definitely did not originate in the mountain and sea realm. They existed in the time of the immortal world. His eyes went wide, and he moved to follow the black-robed man as he left. He took a step and his vision blurred. When it cleared, he was with the black-robed man back up in the starry sky. The black-robed man hovered there thoughtfully before finally looking out into the void. It was as if his gaze could pierce the 33 heavens and see the expanse beyond, including the butterflies dragging the land mass, and the suns pulling the statue, as they rumbled in the direction of the mountain and sea realm. "They're almost here," the black-robed man murmured, his voice so icy that the void around him grew colder. That was not done intentionally, it was merely a result of his murderous aura. He looked off into the distance and then began to walk. Each step he took seemed without end, and Meng Hao hurried to keep up. However, in the space of a few breaths, the man was so far away that he knew it would be impossible to catch up to him. Meng Hao knew that he couldn't catch up because the man didn't want him to. Urgently, he called out, "Senior, who are you, sir?" "A person who probably shouldn't be here," was the icy response. The black-robed man was now further off in the distance. Meng Hao was the type of person to seize every opportunity. As the saying went, he would pluck feathers from a passing goose. Although he was awestruck by the black-robed man, he gritted his teeth and said, "Senior, look, we are bound by ties of destiny. Could you please teach me some of your Taoist magic, senior? I mean, the reason you're here has something to do with me, right?" The black-robed man paused in mid-step. It seemed he rarely encountered cultivators the likes of Meng Hao. "Spatial bending. If you master that and we meet again, then I guess I can pass on to you the secret to call the wind." The black-robed man's voice drifted out behind him as he vanished into the starry sky. 3. Spatial bending is the name of a magic that Wang Lin used in Renegade Immortal. It didn't do exactly the same thing as this Taoist magic, but was very similar. There was no way for Meng Hao to catch up. However, several different emotions could be seen on his face as he looked at the man leaving, and in fact, his eyes began to shine. So he really is a patriarch of the Wang clan. The magic of Call the Wind was something Meng Hao had seen Wang Mu unleash. He had always felt it to be extraordinary, but had never been able to acquire it. 4. Call the Wind is something that has come up several times. Wang Mu used it, as did the 10th Wang clan patriarch back on planet South Heaven. It's another of the techniques Wang Lin used in Renegade Immortal. "Ah well, it is what it is. Wang Mu, you owe me money, but now I'm in no hurry to get it back. Having karma connecting me to you is the same as having karma with the Wang clan." Heart filled with decisiveness, he turned, closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them and took a step. Much the same as before, he slipped into a strange state as he began to experiment with walking in that strange, prescribed fashion. "This magic is called spatial bending, huh? It seems that this is just the first step, a way to bend space-time." Meng Hao was very excited. He could already think of many ways that this Taoist magic could be used in magical combat. In fact, if he got familiar enough with it, perhaps he could even use it to travel through time. At this thought, a strange look appeared in Meng Hao's eyes as he walked off into the distance. Time passed as he walked in that special fashion for several days. During that time, he didn't worry about collecting any debts, nor did he stop by any asteroid teleportation portals. He was separated from the world, alone as he traversed the starry sky, getting familiar with the walking technique. In the middle of his enlightenment, the transmission Jade slip within his bag of holding vibrated many times. However, he didn't notice that, as he was fully immersed in the strange state. He had no idea, but during those several days, someone he knew was traveling all around looking for him. engulfed in grief. That person went to planet South Heaven, and then to planet East Victory. He scoured the entirety of the Fang clan and then went to the Song clan, to Mount Sun, and any other place where Meng Hao might have been found. Unfortunately, that person did not find Meng Hao. Is this the working of fate? Is he fated to not be able to see her one last time? The person searching for Meng Hao was Pill Demon. His expression was one of grief, and he sighed constantly. Eventually, he gave up the search and returned to the Mount Kunlun. Another 3 days passed, and eventually Meng Hao awoke from that strange state. His eyes shone with the glow of augury, and then gradually began to flicker with joy. During the past few days, he had grown much more familiar with that strange walking technique. It was only after awakening that Meng Hao noticed that, on the transmission Jade slip in his bag of holding, there were several hundred messages that had unexpectedly accumulated during the past few days. After scanning the messages with divine sense, his mind began to rumble as if with thunder, and his body shook as if it were being struck by lightning. In fact, he almost couldn't believe what was happening. /expand. Although the messages in the Jade slip were all from different people, the words were virtually the same. Chu Yuyan's soul is rapidly dispersing. Come to the Kunlun Society. They all said the same thing. He received messages from his mother, father, and sister, from Patriarch Xiaodou, even from Taiyangzai, Song Luoden, and Sun Hai. The greatest number of messages came from Pill Demon. In addition, there was one message that had come through on the first day that Meng Hao had slipped into his strange trance of walking. It had come from Chu Yuyan. Meng Hao, I hope that you and Su Qing can have a safe and peaceful life together. That single message caused Meng Hao's heart to feel as if it were being stabbed with blades. Meng Hao was trembling. He couldn't quite tell what he was feeling at the moment. However, one thing he was sure about was that if Chu Yuyan's soul was dispersing, it couldn't be an accident. There had to be more to the story. He had no time to sit there thinking, nor was he even sure what exactly he should be thinking about. Only one thought filled his mind, and that was that he did not want Chu Yuyan to perish. How could this have happened? He murmured, transforming into a colorful streak of light that shot toward the nearest asteroid teleportation portal at high speed. As soon as he appeared there, people recognized him and their faces flickered. Many of them were well aware of how everyone in the Ninth Mountain and Sea had been looking for him over the past few days. Immediately, sounds of discussion could be heard. Did you hear about Meng Hao's old flame Chu Yuyan from the Kunlun Society? Her soul is dispersing. These past few days, everyone has been trying to find him, but sadly nobody could. And now here he is. Well, he deserves it with that vicious personality of his. A lot of people are happy to see this happening. Meng Hao blasted forward like the wind, but he could still hear everyone talking, and their words stabbed at his heart like sharp swords. Suddenly, he turned his head, sweeping over them with his gaze. Rumbling sounds could be heard, and one cultivator after another coughed up blood and staggered backward, their cultivation bases collapsing as they let out miserable shrieks. Those were the cultivators who had just spoken biting words. On any other occasion, Meng Hao wouldn't even have acknowledged them. But now, in the throes of deep anxiety, the words they spoke crossed his bottom line. Rumbling could be heard as he shot toward one particular destination. It was none other than the teleportation portal leading to the Kunlun Society. However, just before he reached it, a dozen or so figures suddenly emerged from the crowd to block his path. Based on the ripples emanating from their cultivation bases, it was obvious that these people were from the Jai clan. Furthermore, the person leading them was Jai Dingyang, who knew how long he had been here. And now, in Meng Hao's most anxious moment, he was leading members of the Jai clan to prevent Meng Hao from entering the teleportation portal. Well, if it is Brother Meng, what's gotten you so anxious? Jai Dingyang laughed heartily, eyes shining with a strange light. He almost seemed to be eyeing prey as if he were trying to lure that prey in a certain direction to control its growth and development. The dispersal of Chu Yuyan's soul has really given me a good opportunity to domesticate my prey. Jai Dingyang's smile grew more radiant, and the eyes of the Jai clan cultivators behind him glittered with killing intent. Screw off, Meng Hao roared, his face grim and his voice echoing like thunder. The Jai clan cultivators were instantly enraged and shot directly toward him. What gall, our clan prince allowed you to stop and chat. How dare you say rude things? Scram! Meng Hao's expression didn't change at all as he performed an incantation gesture. Everything rumbled and the starry sky shook. The entire asteroid vibrated as an amorphous tempest shot out toward the members of the Jai clan. As he flew through the air, everything around him shook violently. The tempest was like a huge mouth, bellowing in rage at the Jai clan cultivators. Blood sprayed out of their mouths and they were sent tumbling backward. There were even a few who directly exploded, killed in body and spirit. Meng Hao had already reached the point of disregarding everything else. "Brother Meng, did I offend you or something? All I did was call out a greeting, and yet you dared to kill the people of my Jai clan." Jai Dingyang's face was grim as he took a step forward, causing explosive waves of qi to roll out in all directions. Shockingly, they transformed into a shield of light, which completely blocked the way to the Kunlun Society teleportation portal. The surrounding cultivators looked on silently and even backed up. They looked at the shield with mixed feelings. Anyone who was watching this scene would be able to see what the Jai clan was overtly attempting to do. In Meng Hao's moment of deepest anxiety, when he wanted nothing more than to get to the Kunlun Society, the Jai clan actually blocked his path, in order to delay him even further. All of it was to make Meng Hao even more anxious than before. In any other circumstance, he could shrug it off. But now, when he wasn't even certain whether Chu Yuyan was alive or dead, for the Jai clan to do something like this caused even the surrounding cultivators to feel that they were being excessive. And yet, some of them were happy to delight in the misfortunes of others, and their eyes glinted wickedly. Seeing that his way to the teleportation portal was being blocked caused Meng Hao's eyes to burst with killing intent. Without stopping, he charged forward like a meteor directly toward Jai Dingyang. As he closed in, Jai Dingyang snorted inwardly, performed a double-handed incantation gesture, and then shot backward, unexpectedly passing through the protective shield. Next, Meng Hao slammed bodily into the shield. A huge boom could be heard. Meng Hao's fleshly body was comparable to a magical item, and his attack power was backed by the cultivation base of an all-heaven Dao immortal. He was like a sharp arrow that instantly pierced through the shield. As it shattered, he continued on toward the teleportation portal like a lightning bolt. He took no time to get entangled with Jai Dingyang. His only goal was to get to the Kunlun Society as quickly as possible. However, just when Meng Hao was about to step into the teleportation portal, cracking sounds could be heard as it shattered into pieces. Jai Dingyang smiled at Meng Hao as if he were looking at a trapped animal. "Brother Meng, how could you be so rash?" he said. "I wasn't actually trying to stop you. I had just set up some defenses around the teleportation portal because it was too old and in need of repair. It was already on the verge of shattering. See how much I care about you. I didn't want any problems to occur if you stepped into it. That's why I blocked your way." "Well, there's no need to thank me. It was really the right thing to do." Meng Hao trembled, slowly turning around, his murderous aura exploding up. Jai Dingyang continued to smile as he slowly backed up. "Brother Meng, I did all of this with the best of intentions. I'll take my leave now, but don't worry, we'll have plenty of time to get to know each other better in the future and also to build up plenty of karma between us." Smiling mysteriously, his body began to fade away. "You want karma? I'll give you some karma." Meng Hao took a deep breath, and his murderous aura grew stronger as he shot in a beeline toward Jai Dingyang. He moved as fast as lightning, using the exact same bizarre walking technique that he had just spent the past several days getting familiar with. None of the onlookers could see anything strange about it, not even Jai Dingyang. He continued to smile as he faded away. Meng Hao rumbled through the air, making a grasping motion with his right hand. Immediately, the copper mirror began to materialize. Before it could even become fully clear, it changed shape, wrapping around Meng Hao's hand, wriggling into the shape of a long, pitch-black sword. It was a wicked blade, like the weapon of a devil, and it instantly slashed down toward the virtually invisible Jai Dingyang. However, the direction of the slash was not the position in which Jai Dingyang was vanishing, but rather the space in front of that. As the blade slashed down, Meng Hao took another step. All of a sudden, all of the onlookers experienced something bizarre. Suddenly, everything split apart as two different periods of time appeared in front of their eyes. They were like mirror images that twisted, and then turned into a strange vision. Within that vision, the teleportation portal, which had just collapsed, twisted and returned to a state of wholeness. Different versions of Jai Dingyang and Meng Hao could now be seen, like reflections. The reflection of Jai Dingyang had exactly the same expression as before, and was saying the same things. Everyone could see exactly what had just happened moments ago. Then, Jai Dingyang's reflection began to move back to the location where he began vanishing. and also toward the place where Meng Hao was slashing the sword down. It was almost as if Jai Dingyang were personally delivering himself up to Meng Hao's blade. Meng Hao's battle weapon slashed through the reflection of Jai Dingyang, which didn't stop, but rather continued on to the vanishing Jai Dingyang, with whom it then merged. At the same time, the teleportation portal collapsed and Meng Hao said the same cold words he had spoken before. Then he shot forward, formed the battle weapon, slashed out and merged with his true form. All of it happened very quickly and made people confused as to what they were actually seeing. Everyone was shocked and dazzled. When the true forms of Meng Hao and Jai Dingyang merged with their reflections, Meng Hao looked the same as before. However, Jai Dingyang, who was fading away, suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. His blurry figure was then separated into two parts. "What Taoist magic is that?" he roared in disbelief. Then the two parts of him faded away. The only thing that remained behind was an echoing voice filled with terror and astonishment. An injury inflicted within the flow of time, which then merged with the present. Meng Hao had used the strange walking technique to come up, with a battle tactic that was perfectly suited to him. "I twist time, giving me the power to go back into the past and slash you with my blade. When your reflection merges with your true form, then that injury will become a reality." The surrounding cultivators all gasped. If you added all these people together, the types of magical techniques they had seen collectively throughout their lifetimes were vast. And yet, none of them had ever seen anything as unbelievable as what they had just witnessed. Chapter 12:08, Slaying Jai Dingyang Again. Chapter 12:09, Mountains Have No Worries. A slash in the past was equally fatal in the present. A time-shift magic like that was similar to the time magic that Meng Hao already used, and yet it was far, far different. One was the root, the other was the lilipad. As Jai Dingyang faded away, Meng Hao's body flickered as he changed course toward another teleportation portal. Because of Jai Dingyang and how he had obstructed Meng Hao's path, he now had to waste even more time finding another teleportation portal to the Kunlun Society. Almost as soon as he materialized out of that teleportation portal, he could see the Kunlun Society. It was a cloud-wreathed immortal mountain, boundless and majestic, filled with singing of birds and the fragrance of flowers. It was like a celestial paradise, and at first glance nothing about it seemed out of the ordinary. However, on one of the mountain's tallest peaks, thunder and lightning crashed. Further up above, black clouds seethed, seemingly incompatible with their surroundings. As soon as he saw that mountain peak, Meng Hao also caught sight of a figure there who seemed to be offering sacrifices. Every flick of his sleeve would cause colors to flash and rumbling booms to echo out. He was an old man with whom Meng Hao was unfamiliar. However, at that man's side was someone who Meng Hao knew well. It was Pill Demon. Meng Hao's heart began to thump, and he instantly took to flight in the direction of that mountain peak. His arrival instantly attracted the attention of the disciples of the Kunlun Society. Furthermore, because of how he charged in, countless disciples flew out to intercept him, and numerous streams of divine sense converged on him. "Let him come," an ancient voice called out just as the numerous spell formations of the Kunlun Society were about to activate. It came from none other than the old man who was currently fighting back against the powerful vortex up above. Next to him was Pill Demon, who looked over at Meng Hao with mixed feelings and sighed. Meng Hao flew as fast as he could. In the blink of an eye, he had spanned the distance to appear in the air above the mountain peak, directly in front of Pill Demon and the old man. As soon as he appeared, a tremor ran through his body because of what he saw on top of the mountain. It was a jade coffin. Numerous Kunlun Society disciples were arrayed around the coffin, their faces filled with grief. They sat there cross-legged, as if they were trying to come up with some sort of way to resurrect the person in the coffin. "You're too late," Pill Demon said in a quiet, hoarse voice. "Yesterday at dawn, her physical soul dispersed. I asked the Patriarch to come help reconverge the spiritual links to Chu Yuyan's soul. Unfortunately, he was unable to reform that which has dissipated." Meng Hao was shaking, and his mind roared. What Pill Demon had just said almost didn't seem to register as he stared at the coffin and Chu Yuyan inside. She almost seemed to be sleeping. Even now that he was here, Meng Hao felt that all of this was too sudden. It was so sudden that he couldn't accept it. It seemed impossible. "How could this have happened?" he murmured. Stabs of pain filled his heart as he approached the coffin. Immediately, the surrounding Kunlun Society disciples' eyes went wide with rage. "Screw off, you don't qualify to come here." "Are you Meng Hao, The man Junior Sister Chu could never forget about is you. You don't deserve to be standing here. Heartless, unethical people like you are prohibited from defiling the corpse of elder Sister Chu. These Kunlun Society disciples were people who had developed friendships with Chu Yuyan during her time in the Kunlun Society. Some were her sisters, others were people who admired her. To see Meng Hao show up here when they were so heartbroken caused them to immediately vent their rage. When the words hit Meng Hao's ears, his heart twinged with intense pain. As he stepped forward silently, a young man burst out from the crowd to stand in front of him, eyes bloodshot. Enraged, he yelled, "Are you a man or not? You knew how Chu Yuyan felt about you. You knew, and yet you heartlessly refused her. What do you think you're doing here now? Screw the hell off." The young man extended his right hand, performed an incantation gesture, and pointing toward Meng Hao. A magical technique immediately materialized and shot toward Meng Hao. His action caused other disciples to immediately make moves of their own. Meng Hao didn't respond at all, nor did he dodge their attacks. He just kept walking forward, surrounded by booming sounds. Finally, Pill Demon shouted, "Stay your hands. Let him pass. Nobody qualifies more than him to see Yanner." His voice crashed like thunder, booming out in all directions. Chu Yuyan's fellow disciples immediately ceased attacking. Glaring at Meng Hao, they began to file past him as they returned to their places, filled with rage and grief. As they passed, all of them made various biting comments. "Chu Yuyan waited for you for years until she finally perished," one woman said icily. "What a waste." I'm not sure why the link to Junior Sister Chu's soul suddenly dispersed, but I do know that when she returned recently she was seriously injured. She never fully recovered from those injuries. Don't tell me you're unaware of why they occurred. Meng Hao, Meng Hao. It won't matter how famous you get in the Ninth Mountain and Sea, don't you ever forget for all eternity that you owe this woman far, far too much. Their words were like razor-sharp swords against which there was no possible defense. It didn't matter how powerful his fleshly body was. He could do nothing to prevent them from piercing deep into his heart. His insides ached, and his face was ashen as he silently walked forward. He let the people say what they wished to say as he neared the coffin, and then looked down at Chu Yuyan laying inside. She wore a long white garment, and her countenance was beautiful. Her skin was so delicate it seemed that a breeze could shatter it. If it weren't for the fact that she was completely devoid of any color of blood, Meng Hao might think that she actually was sleeping. However, the aura of death on her made the difference between life and death very clear. It was like the difference between yin and yang, boundless and infinite. His mind was a blank as he stared down at her. He had never imagined that a day like this would come. Back in the Nine Seas God world, something similar had happened, but in the end, Chu Yuyan didn't die. Now, though, Meng Hao lifted a trembling hand and placed it on Chu Yuyan's forehead. After sending some divine sense into her, he began to shake even harder. "Dead," he murmured. His heart ached as he recalled an image from the past. It was a scene in which Chu Yuyan stood next to Wang Tengfei, as if they were a celestial couple. 1. Can you believe that it was in chapter 35 that Chu Yuyan came to take Wang Tengfei away from the Reliance sect? Next, he saw Chu Yuyan and himself in the volcano, after which came everything that happened in the Violet Fate sect. Later, they saw each other again in the southern domain when he and Su Qing got married. Chu Yuyan had been there, a complex expression in her eyes. Although she wore a smile on her face, that smile only hid her silent weeping. All of those were memories that he would keep in his mind forever. Proud, that was Chu Yuyan. When she realized that Meng Hao hadn't picked her, she chose to leave. She thought that she could forget, but later, when she looked back at everything that had occurred, she had realized something. You can choose not to fall in love with me, but I have only two choices: fall in love with you or fall in love with you harder. That was why, when she saw Meng Hao again in the Ninth Sea, she was actually very happy and content. No matter how she seemed on the surface, in her heart, those were wonderful times. Back then, she had wished that things could go on like they had for a bit longer. She hadn't hoped for an eternity, only that time would slow down for just a little bit. Therefore, when she saw Meng Hao fighting so hard in the windswept realm, when she heard his unyielding roar, she didn't hesitate or even think about what to do. In a moment which wasn't appropriate for her to make her breakthrough, she risked her own cultivation base and even risked the chance of being seriously injured. At that time, she didn't consider what consequences there might be. She only considered how to help Meng Hao. And so she did what she did, even though Meng Hao hadn't spared her a second glance at the time. What a dummy! Perhaps the reason he loves Su Qing is because she's a dummy too. That was what Chu Yuyan thought to herself as she sighed and stepped into the vortex after the events in the windswept realm. Meng Hao's face grew more and more pale as he thought about everything. Chu Yuyan's smile seemed to occupy all of his memories about her, and all of a sudden, Meng Hao felt as if his heart were cracking open. Everything that she had done caused deep regret to well up from deep inside of him. It was a regret so profound that it ensured he would never be able to forget this woman, not for the rest of his life. How could this have happened? He murmured, coughing up some blood. It was at this point that a cold, enraged voice echoed out like thunder from up above. Meng Hao, she chose you, so I wished you well. I hoped that she would be happy and blessed. But how could you be so callous, so heartless? If you didn't love her, why did you have to encourage her? If you didn't choose her, why give her hope? Why did you have to steal her away from me? Menghao. The voice was filled with endless fury mixed with grief. As it descended from the sky, an enormous figure appeared up above. He had stars on his forehead, and it was none other than the man who had awoken the bloodline of the gods, Wang Tengfei. He roared furiously, causing colors to flash in the sky as he shot down like a meteor, heading directly toward Meng Hao. As he did, he clenched his hand into a fist which he struck out at Meng Hao's chest. Meng Hao didn't fight back as Wang Tengfei's thunderous voice slammed into his ears. Blood sprayed from Meng Hao's mouth, and his face became even whiter. It wasn't that he didn't have any feelings for Chu Yuyan. However, between her and Su Qing, he cared for Su Qing more. That didn't mean that he wanted to treat Chu Yuyan coldly. Deep in his heart, he wanted her to be happy. He even wished that she could somehow forget about him and find her own path to happiness. It was something he had never really taken the time to think about before, about whether or not he had been selfish. But now, looking down at Chu Yuyan's corpse, hearing Wang Tengfei rage, Meng Hao's heart tore apart. Within that pain, he finally realized that he truly had been selfish. His voice nothing more than a murmur, he said, "Mountains have no worries, till hit with snowy flurries. Waters feel no woe, till the winds do gust and blow." 1. Here's an alternate translation of the poem. The mountains have not a care, yet the snows whiten their hair. Water feels not the world's woe, yet its face wrinkles when winds blow.